If there's one thing I've learned from doing these ring videos, it's that having a drugged up person ringing your doorbell at off hours in the night is more likely than I would have ever thought. In this video, a confused looking man approaches a random porch holding what appears to be a plastic bag and a roll of toilet paper. Right from the moment he gets on the porch, you can tell something is off by his nervous, almost twitchy behavior. It appears the man could possibly be on meth or some other hard drug. When the homeowner answers through the closed door, the man clearly has a hard time figuring out how to identify himself. And when his face gets close to the camera, you can see how dilated his pupils are, confirming he's definitely under the influence of drugs.
How can I help you?
This is, my name is James.
When the homeowner asks who he's looking for, pay attention to the name he gives.
What are you looking for?
Sosa.
Who?
Sammy?
The first name he gives is Sosa, and then Sammy. Sammy Sosa, like the baseball player. It might have been the first name he could think of while trying to come up with a fake friend he was looking for.
What's your name?
James.
And who are you looking for?
No, a friend of mine.
No friend of yours lives here, buddy. And I got a Glock over here ready for you. So if you don't get the fuck off my porch, I'm gonna unload it on your fucking face. Get the fuck off my porch.
All right.
The reason why he was trying to get into the house is anybody's guess, which is perhaps the scariest part of situations like this. The homeowner handled it perfectly by communicating through the door before opening it, and after catching on to the man's suspicious behavior, he made the man on his porch aware of the fact that he had a gun and was willing to use it. Even if he didn't actually have a gun, the threat was still an effective way to get the man away from his front door. This next one is really disturbing. The person who uploaded this video is neighbors with the actual would-be victim. In the video caught by the Ring camera, 3 armed, masked men are seen approaching the front door to the house. The one in front armed with what appears to be an assault rifle. The masked man who approached the door keeps trying to block the view of the camera with his glove. Though there's no sound, it seems they're contemplating continuing their attempted break-in due to the doorbell camera. Based on body language, it appears the one with the assault rifle is apprehensive, but one of his accomplices motions for him to go back to the door multiple times. Since the camera was covered by the person's glove for most of the footage, we can't see what exactly they were doing for most of it, but luckily the homeowner didn't answer the door, and the 3 armed men were not able to enter the house. The following footage is viewer submitted. In the video, there's a man standing there in front of the house, cursing, seemingly talking to himself for 10 to 15 minutes. Without a little background context, it wouldn't exactly be unsettling per se, but when you learn why the man is standing there, it becomes a little more uncomfortable. A family member of the homeowner was mauled by a pack of dogs and bitten at least 12 times. The man who owned the dogs came to their house and stood on the front step muttering and cursing for 15 minutes until the police came.
Star Wars people, like, they don't even get that shit. They don't understand the flicks they watch and shit, how these people fucking do. Never had a problem with her, never had no issues. I never denied that shit, that the dog fucking bit her or nothing. Never denied none of that crap. Never denied none of that. But there they were. And then her too, the damn neighbor fucking playing out there. When the fuck out there in that neighborhood? She's idiotic, man. And fucking white people too, like, it's dumb. It's fucking dumb. They're gonna put all the dogs to sleep over a fucking dog bite. A dog bite. A freaking dog bite. When the hell did I can threaten her? When the hell did I even make, like, she thinks I don't know where she lives at? I've been knowing. I've been knowing.
The man seemed unstable just from the video alone, not even factoring in the fact that he owned a pack of untrained, aggressive dogs. This one is a great example of why situational awareness is so important. A couple's Ring doorbell video caught a duo of wigged, armed aggressors who had been following them home. The couple said they were walking home when a man and woman started following them all the way to their front door, where the male aggressor pointed a gun at the back of their heads. Luckily, the couple hurried in and slammed the door shut first thing, and the wigged aggressors turned and ran towards their getaway vehicle, laughing. Minutes after the aggressors sped off, they robbed another person at gunpoint, this time successfully. Luckily, only one day after the video was released to the media, a person who recognized the male gunman turned him in and he was arrested, though his name hasn't been released to the public. If the couple had not immediately gone inside and slammed the door, who knows what may have happened. This next one is an example of how just the presence of a doorbell camera can be a deterrent. Here we see a man in an apartment complex going up to somebody's door pretending to be police so that the person on the other side would open up. Whether he knew the people who lived there or not is unknown, but obviously whatever would have happened if the door was opened wouldn't have been good.
Police!
As soon as he glances over to the camera, you can see the expression on his face that says it all. And a couple seconds later, he leaves, and it sounds like he says, "Oh shit, I'm in the wrong one."
Oh shit, I'm in the wrong one.
Which my take on it would be he realized what he just did was all on video, so to play it off or give himself some sort of out, he thought by saying he's at the wrong room on video would somehow save himself from possible incrimination. This one is really upsetting, but thankfully no one got hurt. On September 14th of 2022, two armed masked men entered the home of an elderly couple in Virginia and ordered them into a closet where they would be forced to wait while the two robbers stole their valuables.
Get in the crib, don't say nothing, Y'all get in the closet, right now. Get in the closet, I'm not fucking playing, get in the closet right now. Get in the closet, hurry up, get up. Get up. Hurry up.
But if you listen closely, you can hear the elderly woman tell the robbers that her husband had hip surgery as they were ordering him to hurry up and get up. And then the old man himself says it as he struggles to get up and make his way to the closet door.
Hurry up, get up.
Once the couple's in the closet, the robbers soon leave as one carries out a safe while the other grabs a wallet and the couple's phones. There were apparently tens of thousands of dollars in that safe belonging to someone who was staying with the couple. Police identified the two suspects as Mitchell Boney Jr., who was 25, and Tyree DeMont Boney Jr., who was 22. Mitchell actually turned himself in and was charged with armed burglary, use of a firearm, abduction, and conspiracy to commit a burglary. Tyree is still allegedly on the run. Perhaps the scariest part of this is that they clearly knew where the safe was. Tyree wasted no time going straight for where the safe was. This means anyone who was in the house, such as a home repairman, home healthcare worker, or anyone, could have seen the safe and relayed this information to other people, which is why you should always be careful of who's in your house and what they see. What you're about to see is the discovery made by the YouTuber Connor Kelly in the McCoy Mine in Lander County, Nevada. The McCoy Mine is a silver and gold mine at the elevation of 5,400 feet. Connor arrives in a group of 4 via motorbikes, and upon entry of the cave, everything seems normal at first. But as they get deeper into the cave, Connor notices something reflecting the light of his flashlight. As they get closer, they realize what it is.
Oh, Jesus, what the fuck? It's shoe.
Oh,
Look, is that like a fossil?
It's a pile of shoes, but to make it even more disturbing, it's a pile of children's shoes. Mixed in with the shoes are various bones laying in the pile. Connor then looks further down the cave, and you can see skeletal remains of some type of animal, possibly a coyote or deer. The shoes all appear to be older, with 80s styling on a lot of them, and obviously whoever or whatever put them there deliberately made a pile out of them. Connor said they contacted police on the matter, but they didn't seem to take it seriously or care. The bones could easily be explained away as the cave being some kind of animal feeding grounds, but the pile of shoes isn't as easily explainable. There's always the question of if this was a prank to scare people, but this honestly seems like it would take a lot of effort for a prank or failed viral video attempt. A more disturbing explanation would be that this is or was a dump for abducted kids, where their shoes would be removed for whatever reason and dumped there, possibly as trophies. An example that could be compared to this was in the early 1900s in Walled Lake, Michigan. There was believed to be a sick and cruel man who began murdering kids in the area, and after he would dispose of the bodies, he threw their tiny shoes up into the branches of a tree. Eventually the man was caught, and people found his tree ornamented with dangling shoes of dead children, almost as if it were one big trophy to him. Whether this is something similar to that, or just a weird prank that somebody spent way too much time on, will probably remain a mystery. But one thing's for certain, there aren't many possible explanations for this. If you're claustrophobic, this story will make you uneasy. This is the tragic tale of John Edward Jones, who was a 26-year-old medical student and family man. When he was younger, he explored many caves with his father and his brother, so he'd been exploring caves practically his entire life. But one cave proved to be too dangerous even for John, the Nutty Putty Cave. This cave was known for its notoriously narrow spaces. They were first explored by Dale Green in 1960. The cave is located southwest of Utah Lake and 55 miles from Salt Lake City. John entered Nutty Putty Cave at around 8 p.m. on the evening of November 24, 2009, a few days before Thanksgiving. John, his 23-year-old brother Josh, and several other friends and family members all decided to explore Nutty Putty Cave as a way to spend time with each other ahead of the holiday. John was married, had a 1-year-old daughter, and was attending medical school in Virginia. He had come back home to Utah to spend some time with his family for the holiday, making the story all the more tragic. About an hour into their expedition into the Nutty Putty Cave, John decided to crawl through a tight passage that he mistakenly thought was known as the birth canal. Unfortunately, this passage was way tighter. He inched his way into the narrow passage head first, moving forward using his hips, stomach, and fingers. But within minutes, he realized he'd made a terrible mistake. He knew that he was more or less stuck and had no room to turn around or even wriggle back out the way he came. He had no choice but to try to press forward. He tried to exhale the air in his chest so that he could fit through a space that was barely 10 inches across and 8 inches high. But when John inhaled again and his chest puffed back out, he got stuck for good. Josh found his brother, and in a tragic turn of events, as he was pulling at John's calves, John slid further down the shaft. What's worse is that now he was stuck upside down with one hand beneath him and the other wedged above. At this point, the two boys started to pray. Eventually, Josh made it back to the surface to call for help. But even once help came, John was still trapped 400 feet into the cave and 100 feet below the Earth's surface. Getting the people, equipment, and supplies down that far took over an hour. Due to John being stuck upside down, time was of the essence. In an upside down position, a healthy young person could live for a few hours, but probably not much more. The body is adapted to work with gravity, not against it. Blood flows the way it does with gravity's help. Our organs sit where they are because of how we stand, so John's blood pressure was falling dangerously low, and his organs would start to crush each other if he didn't get out soon. This position would also require the heart to work incredibly hard to continuously pump excess blood out of the brain. The first rescuer to reach John was a woman named Susie Motola, who arrived at about 12:30 a.m. on November 25th. At that point, John had been trapped for 3.5 hours. Susie introduced herself to John, even though all she could see of him was a pair of navy and black running shoes. John said back to her, "Hi Susie, thanks for coming, but I really want to get out." Over the next 24 hours, more than 100 rescue personnel worked to free John from the depths of the Nutty Putty. The best plan they had was to try to use a system of pulleys and ropes to try to free John from his position. Rescuers tied John with a rope connected to a series of pulleys, causing him to scream in pain due to a lack of blood in his lower body. Everything was ready, and they pulled as hard as they could, but suddenly and without warning, one of the pulleys failed. Rescuers believe the pulley came loose at its anchor point in the cave wall. The rope and pulley operation failed, and the rescuers had no other viable plans. John was trapped. With no hope of rescue and his heart having suffered hours upon hours of strain due to his downward position, John was pronounced dead of cardiac arrest shortly after midnight on the evening of November 25th. A week after John's death, the Nutty Putty cave was sealed off for good. Perhaps the scariest part is that they never recovered his body, and his remains will stay down there forever. This one, while being kind of creepy, is also pretty interesting. A YouTuber by the name of Water Skipper posted a video exploring a cave in Oregon called the Malheur Cave. On the surface, it looks like a pretty normal cave, until the bleachers on either side come into view. Now, anyone would wonder what exactly bleachers would be doing in a cave. One might assume some kind of secret underground rituals could be going on in there. And in a place as creepy as deep in a cave, these would probably be some sick rituals. However, the cave is owned by the Masonic Lodge of Burns. For decades, the Freemason group in Oregon held their meetings in this cave, cleaning and maintaining the area. But obviously a group holding private meetings in a creepy cave is going to create bad rumors and conspiracy theories regarding both the Masons and the cave itself. One of those theories claiming that the cave hosted satanic rituals and devil worship. The cave has been closed off since 2019, when local Masons put up a gate at the cave entrance in order to stop the vandalism and graffiti that was plaguing the site. Kenny Veach is someone I've talked about before, but his story is perhaps one of the more chilling stories having to do with caves. Kenny was a YouTuber and caver who disappeared in 2014 after attempting to explore a cave he nicknamed the M Cave, which he reported hearing unusual noises from and found it suspicious as it was located 6 miles south of a top-secret airbase. As he began to enter the cave, he claimed his whole body began to vibrate. The more he went into the cave, the worse the vibrating became. He said he suddenly became very afraid and hightailed it out of there. He uploaded this video to talk about his experience with the cave.
I got to still go over another ridge and then go all the way down a big crevice that's real narrow and gets kind of scary. I'm looking for a cave that I found, and I didn't have a sidearm when I was here before, and something about that cave just spooked me. Out of all the caves I've ever gone in, this one just made my body vibrate. The closer I got to it, the crazier my body felt, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to go in there right now, but I'm coming back someday. And I talked to some people on YouTube, and I told them, hey, I'm coming out here, you know, because they kind of called my hand on it. So I don't know if there's going to be anything to it, but it might be interesting. If I can find it, I got to relocate it, and this is a big mountain range I'm in.
Of course, the internet being what it is, people made fun of him and accused him of making the whole thing up, or at least fabricating the story. Basically, Kenny was pressured into going back to the cave a second time, even though he was afraid to enter it the first time. Kenny gave in to the pressure and returned to the cave, and he has not been seen since. His phone was found in an abandoned mine entrance, but no body was ever found. Kenny was an extremely nice and likable guy, making his disappearance and likely death all the more tragic. People believe that given the close proximity to the airbase, Kenny was actually murdered by the government. Proponents of this theory believe that the M Cave Kenny discovered was an entrance to some kind of top-secret government facility due to its close proximity to Nellis Air Force Base and Area 51. They believe that the vibrating sensation Kenny felt while near the cave was a defense mechanism to keep civilians from entering. Under this same theory, Kenny saw government secrets within the cave and was kidnapped by US soldiers when he emerged. A YouTuber by the name of Abandoned Mines 11 posted a video of what he believes to be the M Cave that Kenny described, and it's pretty credible. The cave appears to have been walled off and sealed, preventing access inside.
Okay, I made it up here to the entrance of this M Cave. There's the one side of it, comes down and then goes back up there and down. Now, this doesn't look to be very deep at all, and it looks like they were trying to wall it off. There's stacked rocks right there, as well as behind me here, like right there.
The YouTuber finds multiple items on the floor, like planks of wood and a beer bottle with no label, possibly a bottle Kenny was carrying. Most interestingly, he finds an Area 51 warning sign, which actually may back up the theories that this was some kind of entrance to an underground facility owned by the government. But this is all speculation, and what actually happened to Kenny is still unknown. This story follows Ivan, a man who lives in the neighborhood of the Arts in a small western New York City. Over the past 10 years, he's moved around a decent amount, from his hometown where he currently resides, to Orlando, Florida, to another city in western New York, and then finally back to his hometown. He had lived in a couple different apartments since moving back to his hometown, none of them anything special, until he finally found what seemed to be the perfect apartment in the attic of an old mansion that was converted into apartments. It was downtown in the neighborhood of the Arts, an ideal place to live for young, artistic, creative individuals. Ivan moved in with one of his childhood best friends since it was a 3-bedroom and he would need roommates in order to maintain the rent for the place. The first year living there was uneventful, which was ideal for Ivan. As far as neighbors, there were 2 men who were likely a couple that always got into fights so loud that everyone in the building could hear, and on one occasion, one of them locked the other out of their apartment naked, and given that the mansion was across the street from a school, the cops were called. But as long as they didn't involve Ivan or his roommates, they would try to stay out of any of the drama. After about a year of living there, a young couple, a guy and a girl in their late 20s to early 30s, moved into apartment 2, and they seemed friendly at first, and always said hi when passing in the hall or anytime Ivan would be hanging out on the front porch. They were pretty decent neighbors for the first year to year and a half that they lived there. One day, Ivan came home from work and noticed that someone had put some furniture on the front porch. Ivan immediately assumed it was the couple in apartment 2 since they had an entrance to their apartment right on the porch. As he was getting ready to head into the building, the guy living in apartment 2 came out and introduced himself as John and told Ivan that he wanted to build a community within the apartment building. Ivan, being a people person and caring about his community, was initially all for this idea. For the next few days, Ivan would come down after he got home from work and hang out on the porch since it was springtime and he wanted to enjoy the nice weather. He would sit on the couch on the porch and either read a book or work on his computer, and for the time being, it seemed nice that the community porch was set up. A few days after he met John, Ivan found him and another one of his neighbors talking on the porch about something that happened. Someone had stolen another neighbor's motorcycle from the driveway. Everybody ended up having a small tenant meeting where they waited for the cops to show up and tried to make the one neighbor whose motorcycle had been stolen feel better. When the cops showed up, Ivan went up to his apartment and let the police do their jobs. The next day, when Ivan got out of work, he walked into his apartment and his roommate asked him about John, mentioning that he left gifts for every apartment. Everyone got something different. Ivan and his roommate's gift was a shoebox filled with comics, books, toys, and chocolates. The roommates agreed the gifts seemed odd, but at the time, Ivan's odd gesture could still just be seen as friendly. But then, Ivan's roommate told him something that started to make him uncomfortable about John. His name wasn't John, it was Sean. Ivan considered the fact that maybe he misheard his name since they can sound similar, until he remembered that the guy even spelled out his name for Ivan as John when they first talked. Later on that same night, Ivan's other roommate, who had moved in at the end of the previous year, came home after seeing his daughters and told Ivan that Sean was outside asking for him. He told him that when he was walking up to the building, Sean had come out from the shadows of the side of the building, wearing only a pair of shorts. He asked Ivan's roommate to have him come down and help him get something out of his trunk. After everything that was stacking up, Ivan knew there was no way he was going down there to help him. Something felt wrong to him, rightfully so. Ivan woke up the next morning to go to work, and on his way out of the building, he stopped on his porch, and in the middle of his front yard was what Ivan described as a hobo garden. Sean had set up a bunch of garbage around a half-empty refrigerator that had the door ripped off. There was broken glass everywhere, and there was a patch of dirt dug up in front of it, as you can see in this picture taken by Ivan. Not only was this an extreme eyesore, but this would also be freakishly weird of somebody to do. Ivan immediately called his landlord and told him that he was not okay with that and that Sean was starting to weird everyone out. They told him they would address it, and so Ivan left it at that and went to work. When he got home from work, some of the garbage had been moved to the side of the road, but no one was around. Ivan decided that it would be better to just go up to his apartment and not get involved anymore, since he was starting to feel like something wasn't right. Ivan was only in his apartment for about 5 minutes at most before he started hearing yelling coming from outside the bedroom window, not directed towards him, just loud yelling coming from outside. When he looked outside his window, he saw Sean throwing the garbage from the yard into the street. He was freaking out, apparently yelling to himself. Then another one of Ivan's neighbors, Mark, ran up to him and tried to calm him down. One of Ivan's roommates returns home at this time, and he decided to try to help calm him down as well. After a few minutes, things went silent other than the sounds of cars driving down the street. Ivan's roommate then came inside and started telling him about Sean's freakout outside. Sean had been yelling that he doesn't think he did anything wrong. By this point, it was clear that Sean was an unhinged individual, and so Ivan told his roommate to try not to interact with him if possible. Things seemed to be getting worse and worse. It was only a few hours later that Ivan started to hear more yelling and even started feeling the building walls shake a little bit. Someone was arguing with someone, and things were clearly getting physical, evident by all the noise and shaking. Ivan contemplated calling the police, but decided to text his neighbor Mark first since he lived on the same floor as Sean. Mark didn't text back right away, not until after things seemed to calm down. Mark told Ivan that Sean got into a huge fight with his girlfriend, and Mark once again had tried to calm him down, and in response, Sean tried to fight Mark. Mark called the cops on him, and Sean ended up being taken to the station by the police. Things didn't end there though. In fact, things only got worse. That Friday night, Ivan stayed at his girlfriend's apartment after the couple had a date night. When he woke up that morning at her place, Ivan had a slew of messages and missed phone calls. When he opened up the first message from his roommate, the first thing he saw was a picture of fire trucks outside of their apartment building. Apparently Sean had burnt down his apartment. Ivan's roommate said that only Sean's apartment was burnt up, but Ivan still rushed home after hearing that so he could figure out what exactly was going on. When he got there, Mark and Ivan's roommate were standing on the porch. Sean claimed that something went wrong with his stove and that was it. But when the firefighters checked the building, they found that the vents around the outside of the house looked like they had been stuffed with towels and clothes, as if he were trying to keep the fumes from escaping. The cops were called, and Sean was taken away once again. But still, that wasn't the end of it. Sean officially got evicted that week, and that following Monday, Mark had gotten word that Sean had been released from holding. All the tenants were a little nervous to hear that. That Tuesday night, someone had showed up to the building and busted a bunch of the windows around the apartment, and very clearly tried gaining access to apartment 2. That someone was obviously Sean. There were also drawings, swastikas, and writings left on the back door, saying pig, land is free, kill, and Roy. Mark had enough and filed for a restraining order against Sean. Unfortunately, that only aggravated Sean more. Over the night on Wednesday, Sean would make another attack. Ivan woke up once again to a slew of texts. Mark and Ivan's roommate had apparently tried to wake Ivan up overnight, but he was in too deep of a sleep to hear them. Ivan opened up Mark's text since he saw he sent him the most messages, and there were a bunch of pictures attached. The pictures were all of Mark's car, burnt to the ground, completely destroyed. Sean was erratic and dangerous, and now all the tenants were living in fear of what he would do next. The next night, all the tenants in the building had a meeting on the front porch. Mark filled everybody in on all the information that he gathered on Sean. Apparently, Mark had been in contact with Sean's mother, who was trying to smooth things over by being transparent with Mark. He found out that Sean was planning on skipping town. Mark also managed to get footage of Sean walking over to Mark's car overnight and then walking away. There was a case here, but that didn't make anyone feel better about anything. As all the neighbors talked, everyone shared everything that they could. The woman in apartment 3 told everyone that one night, she walked by her window only to see Sean out there, standing on the side of the building, using a bag of water that he filled with holes and just staring at her while doing so. The woman in apartment 4 had been receiving stalker-esque notes and poems in her mail. Everybody in the building was being terrorized by this guy. the last bit of information given to Mark by Sean's mom was quite disturbing. Sean's mom said that he had been following Ivan, his roommates, Mark, and the woman in apartment 4. Not only that, but Sean had followed Ivan to his girlfriend's house and watched them through her windows. Ivan knew the man was dangerous and was now stalking him and potentially his girlfriend. For the next week, if Ivan wasn't standing guard on his front porch, he was checking in on his girlfriend's house. Thankfully, a few days later, the tenants finally got news that Sean had been arrested. Shortly after that, Mark and half of the other tenants moved out of that building since they had had enough. Ivan and his roommates have stayed living in the building to this day and haven't had any issues since. But hopefully for their sakes, Sean won't be getting out of jail anytime soon. July 15th, 1976, Chowchilla, California. A day that the town would like to forget forever, yet remains a part of its history. At around 4 p.m., school bus driver Ed Ray was driving 26 students of Dairyland Elementary School home from a summer class trip to the Chowchilla Fairgrounds swimming pool. Ray was described as a humble rancher with a humble day job. Stocky, about 55 years old, a guy you would not want to pick a fight with, a guy who works with his hands and doesn't talk much. On this particular day, Ed's bus was rowdy, but the kids all loved him for his patience and reliability. The kids were all loud and excited after just having spent the afternoon swimming. Some of them were even singing, but when the bus turns onto Avenue 21, Ray sees a white Dodge van blocking the road with its door open. He tries to weave around the empty van, when a guy in overalls with a pantyhose covering his face jumps out in front of the bus with a revolver. The man walks to the driver's side window and asks Ed, with no intimidation in his voice, "Would you open the door, please?" Ed opens it. 2 more identically dressed figures jump in, one with a rifle which is quickly pointed at Ed. Everybody goes to the back of the bus. The one without a rifle starts to drive, and the one with the revolver hops in the van to follow them. They drive about a mile and park the bus in a bamboo thicket. The entire ride was apparently so silent that it added to the pure horror of it. The bus was hidden near the Chowchilla River, and 12 kids were ushered into the white van that was following the bus. Ray and the other 14 kids got into the back of the second van that was waiting at the location, this one green. There was a partition separating the driver's seat to the back of the van, and all the windows were sealed. Ed and all the kids sat in the backs of these vans for 11 whole hours, in the pitch black and extreme heats, all the while scared for their lives, not knowing what was going to happen next. Some of the older kids started to sing songs to try to lighten the incredibly horrible setting and make the younger kids feel better, songs like "If You're Happy and You Know It." Meanwhile, back in town, it only took 15 minutes after the bus not showing up that parents began to wonder what was going on. That's how punctual Ed always was. Within the hour, the missing bus was being talked about on the local news stations. Parents helped police by tracing the route the bus usually took, and by that evening, they found the abandoned bus. Within hours, 30 FBI agents arrived on the scene, and an intense investigation was underway to find the kids and Ed. Late that night, the vans finally arrive at a rock quarry 100 miles away in Livermore, 3:30 in the morning, at which point Ed had been awake for 24 hours. The back doors of the van swing open and 2 guys are waiting. Ed is the first one out. He's handed a flashlight and then told to strip and then go down a hole with a ladder in it. Above ground, roll call is being taken for the children, and their names are written as they're made to leave the bus one by one. Then they're stripped and sent to join Ed down the ladder into what was referred to as the hole, which turned out to be an old moving van, which had been placed in a large dugout hole 12 feet underground. Ed immediately worried that the ceiling would cave in or that they'd suffocate. However, there were 2 air shafts, hoses that ran above ground to a tree. There were also some mattresses on the ground and a pathetic amount of necessities. Wonder Bread, peanut butter, potato chips, water jugs, and some holes carved for toilets. After all the kids were inside, one of the captors said, "We'll be back for you." Then a steel plate slid over the entrance and was weighted down by something. They of course begged to be let out, and many of the younger children screamed. Then they heard repeated thumps on top of the van. They couldn't see it, but their captors were shoveling dirt on top of the van, burying them alive. Panic ensued in the trailer when it was realized what was happening. Ed tried his best to keep everybody calm. Ed and Michael Marshall, the oldest kid in the group, who was 14, started to push at the lid to try and open it, but it was pointless. So by now, Ed instructed everyone to eat and get some rest. 12 hours later, the food was all already consumed, and the ventilation system that was keeping the van cool stopped working, and the hot July air started to fill the tight space. On top of that, the roof of the van started to cave in, and Ed knew time was very limited. The survivors, now adults, recount that around this time, as the walls and ceiling of the van were caving in and there was no food left, that they were starting to realize they wouldn't likely make it out of this alive. Ed and Michael started to pile up the mattresses in the trailer to get to the roof, which had been covered with a heavy sheet of metal and weighted down with 2 100-pound industrial batteries. After hours of effort, Ray and Michael wedged the lid open with a piece of wood and moved the batteries. They then dug away the remainder of the debris blocking the entrance. 16 hours after they had entered the van, the group emerged and walked to the quarry's guard shack, where a security guard called the police. Ed and the children were brought to a nearby jail, where they were fed and interviewed by police. So the captors were 3 men, Frederick Newall Woods, James Schoenfeld, and his brother Richard. Frederick's family owned the quarry that the van was buried at. The 3 men were finding themselves in financial struggles, so they planned to hijack the bus and demand a $5 million ransom to release the group. The men would flee when they saw the group escaped though, but they were found after a 2-week manhunt. They were found guilty and sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. Richard Schoenfeld was released in 2012, and James Schoenfeld was paroled on August 7, 2015. Frederick Woods was denied parole 15 times because he owned the quarry. However, in March of this year, he was granted parole as well. Rightfully so, people of Chowchilla and people around the world were sickened at the fact that the 3 men who committed this kind of monstrous act could ever roam the streets again. If Michael and Ed hadn't stepped up and dug the group out of that van, they likely would not have survived. Ed Ray died at 91 in May 17th of 2012, but he is still to this day remembered as a hero. What you just heard may perhaps be the most well-known near tragedy to happen to a school bus full of children. However, it's a big world, and there are unfortunately many other horrific events that don't end up on the news. Then 14-year-old Donald, who wished to have his last name left out, was a student at a high school in Virginia and a member of the school's band. The bus driver's name was Robert, but everyone called him Bob. Like Ed Ray, he also seemed to enjoy his job and enjoyed the company of the students he drove, albeit these students were a little older. On October 20th of 1995, Bob was driving a class of band students to and from their field trip. Donald was in this bus. The festival they went to ended late at night, around 10, and the drive back to the school where the students would be dropped off was a 45-minute drive away. The bus was on Route 58, a highway that runs through Virginia. Given the rural setting, there were basically no other cars on the road, but even when one car was relatively close to the back of the bus, it wasn't any cause for alarm at first. But when the car would start to tailgate the bus, instead of simply going around it, especially when the bus and the car were the only vehicles in sight, the students near the back of the bus started to realize and discuss amongst themselves how strange it was. Bob the bus driver would switch into the left lane to get the driver off his ass, and all the kids watched as the car floored it past the bus in the right lane. Some kids shouting things out the windows, to which the chaperone on the bus told the kids to knock it off. Donald recalls thinking the car was gone and it was just some aggressive late-night driver, when suddenly the bus slammed on the brakes so hard that everybody was slightly lifted from their seats, and there was an ear-piercing shriek from the brakes. The bus came to a halt on the middle of the highway, and Bob told everyone to remain calm. The bus went into reverse for a few moments, then back in drive to another halt. Bob shouted at everybody on board the bus to keep quiet and don't panic. And hearing those words made Donald, along with his friends he was sitting with, and every other student on the bus whisper amongst themselves nervously. There was shouting from outside the bus from multiple men's voices. Then the bus doors opened, and 2 men wearing black pullover masks armed with handguns came on board, yelling at everyone on the bus to shut up in response to a few students near the front screaming. One of the men with the guns announced to the entire bus to empty their wallets of all cash and take any jewelry off and to give it to them. They went row to row with their guns pointed at the kids, as each student took out their wallets and placed whatever small amounts of money broke high school students could be carrying in their wallets into the plastic bag the guy was holding, and the girls would take off their jewelry. Some students would scream as the gun was pointed in their faces, which would be a natural reaction for some. Donald described the moment he had a gun pointed at his head at 14 as emotionally traumatizing, that he felt his entire existence would end if he moved or looked at the guy the wrong way. The men didn't even make it to the back of the bus before they decided to leave in a hurry, most likely panicked that other cars would pass by and stop. The car floored it away down Route 58 with its lights off. Its license plates had been covered, indicating it was a planned attack, if the guns and masks weren't already indication enough. Everyone on board made it home okay, just most of the students, as well as Bob and the chaperone, had been robbed. Unfortunately, bus robberies are a common thing though, and while most probably aren't caught on video, what you're about to see was. A school bus traveling along the N4 in Whitbank one Friday night this past February was attacked by armed robbers. The teachers did not know it at the time, but the robbers had laid out rocks on the highway, intending to cause damage to vehicles so that the drivers would stop and the robbers could steal from them at gunpoint. The bus was carrying 4 teachers and the driver. There were no pupils in the vehicle. They were traveling back to the school after an athletics meeting when they hit the rocks and ruptured a tire. There were 3 robbers. 2 were armed with guns and 1 with a knife.
I need phone. Okay, yes, you can take it. Give me a phone. Why? Give me a phone. Where is that your car?
The assailants stole cell phones, cash, jewelry, and a smartwatch. The bus driver was hit in the face with a gun and sustained a minor jaw injury, but that was the only injury. The robbers then fled the scene, and eventually a tow truck later pulled over to assist. One of the teachers borrowed the tow truck driver's phone and called her fiancé, who notified the authorities. Police soon arrived, and an investigation began. The robbers have still not been identified. Since buses can carry a lot of people, depending on the intent of the people looking to target them, they may see extra dollar signs just based on the amount of people on board alone. Even though you don't often hear about these things happening on the news, they do happen. In such situations where people are armed with guns, it's always best to just comply with their orders. This is a part 3 to the scariest things caught on doorbell cameras. And once again, by the end of the video, you may consider getting one yourself. In this footage that a viewer sent me, a person can be seen crouch walking towards his front door through his doorbell camera. The person was wearing a hat, face mask, and sunglasses, allowing none of his face to be seen. After trying to open the front door and failing, the person starts to fiddle with the doorbell, noticing it's a video doorbell, so he probably tries to take it off. What likely happened was that when he realized that he couldn't get the doorbell unmounted without a special screwdriver, he started to hold his hand in front of the camera after ringing the bell. The viewer told me that this happened at 2 in the morning, and so when he heard his doorbell and ring notification go off, he instantly went to his phone to check who was at the door, only to see exactly what you're seeing. The man then walks past the doorbell to the side of the house, and by this point, the homeowner was on the phone with 911 reporting the incident. While on the phone with 911, the homeowner heard the doorknob to the side entrance door being fiddled with, and this was a door that he had been known to leave unlocked accidentally from time to time. However, luckily on this night, that wasn't the case. Since the intruder couldn't simply walk in through either door, he started to say hello repeatedly through the door, in an off-putting tone that sounded so overly friendly that it was creepy. The 911 operator told the homeowner not to open the door or to even acknowledge the person. The person would then start to bang on the door for a few moments until seemingly giving up. The police showed up but couldn't help out much based on the video. Later that night, the homeowner received another notification that there was movement at his front door. When he checked the video feed, he couldn't see anyone. He still has no idea who was under that mask and glasses. This following footage was also captured by a viewer's doorbell camera at their old house, which is still active while he tries to sell it. One morning at around 4:30 a.m., his cameras detected a man running from across the street from his neighbor's home, across his front yard, and up to his front door. The man was naked, with one of his hands blocking his privates. The footage was caught from two angles. He was arrested a short while later by local police and was apparently high on crystal meth, and he had removed his clothing due to a fear of snakes being inside of his clothes, and he was running around the neighborhood knocking on doors and ringing doorbells yelling for help. The neighborhood is reportedly pretty quiet. The homeowner never had any sort of issues before this. In his words, he ran up my front yard onto my front porch and rang the doorbell. For the next minute or so, he was ringing the doorbell and knocking while pacing back and forth. He looked panicked, and his expression drifted from someone in pain to a look of pure crazy, and at one point said he needs help. After that, he ran off back into the night. The guy was picked up by an officer around 5 a.m. not far from his house. And this footage is why you always check who's at your door before you open it, especially if you have a doorbell camera. If someone who you don't know shows up to your door late at night, don't open it. Unfortunately, in this video, that's exactly what this homeowner did. Around 10 p.m. one night, a suspicious-looking hooded man approaches the front door of a random house rather quickly and aggressively, and he right away tries to open the door. After realizing it's locked, he goes to ring the doorbell. Disappointingly, the homeowner opens the door rather quickly instead of checking who's at his door at this hour first.
Hello. Hi. How are you, sir? Who are you? Everybody knows. How are you? Good. You need to leave. How far? Out there. What's the stairs going? What? What's the stairs here? Come on, where are you going? What's the stairs here? Goodbye, you.
The homeowner was likely too trusting a person, which put him in danger. Even his initial hi to the stranger at his door sounded overly friendly, considering the man was already creeping in the second the door was opened.
Hello. Hi.
The homeowner pushes the man out, causing him to punch the glass of the door before it's even fully closed. The man then stands there for another minute or so, fiddling with the doorknob a few times, though the rest of the footage is cut off. The dialogue is near impossible to completely make out, but it seemed the man was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and was likely attempting to burglarize the home. The homeowner called the police, but the man was gone by the time they arrived. It's unknown if he was found. This image was posted from the owner of a Ring camera in a Facebook group to caution others. The woman warned in her post to beware a strange man wearing a white mask lurking around the neighborhood after her camera caught him trying to look into her home a little after 10 p.m. one night. The woman said, "I just want my neighbors to be aware and safe. Please, if possible, share this post. Screenshots are welcome." Not sure what colors he was wearing, but had a hoodie and jeans on. The disturbing picture shows the man in the mask looking directly into the camera. This is exactly the type of image that you'd never want or expect to see come up on your doorbell camera footage. But it's also the kind of image that would make you sure as hell grateful that you had one. Neighbors of the woman also reported seeing the man walking around and approached their front doors. Thankfully, no one opened the door to him. On May 1st, 2020, around 9:40 p.m., around the beginning of the COVID lockdown, a 45-year-old dad, Raymond Hawkins, opened the door to who he believed to be a delivery driver dropping off a parcel. Due to new methods of delivery at the time because of COVID, the alleged delivery driver backed away from the front door to supposedly keep his distance and claimed he needed to take a picture of the package at the doorstep, something many delivery drivers must do for more expensive packages. At this time, the father had his guard down due to the fact that he had no idea the man in front of him wasn't a delivery driver, and that he was in fact part of a gang that was about to storm into his house, all of whom armed with knives. Christopher Sargent, the fake delivery driver, lunges at Raymond with a knife and attacks him when he goes to pick up the package, while 3 other masked men follow from behind. Muffled cries come from the house, as there's a struggle between Raymond, his wife, and the robbers. The robbers are only in the house for a few moments before being seen fleeing the house with thousands of dollars worth of items. Raymond and his son suffered non-life-threatening injuries, while his sons were described to be worse. 2 of the culprits would be arrested, Anthony Lascelles and Christopher Sargent, who were both charged with aggravated burglary and possession of a knife. The other 2 culprits were never found. One thing that can be learned from a lot of these videos is that some people will go to crazy lengths to trick other people. The major red flag in this case was that the supposed delivery was taking place at 9:40 p.m., which is way past the time any notable delivery company will deliver packages, usually the latest being 7 p.m. On April 10th, 2020, this was the footage taken by the Ring doorbell of a viewer's friend Kayla in a small California town. Kayla was being stalked by her crazy former friend Thomas, who became obsessed with her over time and would constantly express his alleged love for her, despite her telling him numerous times that she didn't feel the same way. The week that this footage was taken, Kayla was bombarded with texts and voicemails from Thomas. And as you can see if you care to pause the video and read some of the texts, it starts with what seems to be Kayla accepting his apology for his behavior. However, as the texts and voicemails just keep coming in, she begins to realize how crazy he may be. What you're about to hear are some audio clips from different voicemails he's left on her phone after she had stopped answering him.
Hey, Kayla. Listen, I want to make sure you're not too worried about what happened at the party last week. I had an amazing time, and I think you're goddamn beautiful. And I'm sorry I got so sick. I wanted to come be with you while you were getting ready, and I was just so totally out of it, and I'm sorry. God, I think I might love you, and I'm sorry, and I'm gonna give you some space. I want to be there for you and be there for you, and I can't get you out of my fucking head, and I want to be there for you. God damn it. So fucking god damn it. And all I can do is think of you and want to be with you, and I want to be with you. I want to be your Flynn Rider, and I want to be everything to you. God damn it, babe. You're fucking amazing. You are amazing. You're my knight in shining armor, and I'm so fucking terrified of you, and God, I love you so much. So much. Please call me back. No, I lied. I'm not gonna give you some space. I'm sorry. I'm coming over. I know you're up and thinking about me. I'm sorry. I'm fucking God. I'm not sorry. God, I'm coming over. Fucking, I'm already driving. I've been driving the whole time. God damn it. I'm coming over. Fucking, I'm not gonna give you space. I know you called me back. I saw that. Yep. I know you're up thinking about me. God damn it. Oh, God damn it. I'm coming over. One way or another, I'm coming over. Fucking whatever, however, whatever. God, I'm coming over. I'll see ya. I'll be there in like 10 minutes or whatever. Whatever. I'm coming over right now. Damn it. I'll see ya. Bye. I love you. Rough road. Oh, it's a rough road. Fuck you, Kayla. I am fucking crazy. God damn it. Fuck you. I'll drive into the field. God damn it. Things like that, son. Fuck you. Fuck you, Kayla. I am goddamn crazy. I'm crazy for you. God damn it. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it for you. I am crazy. Oh, that one could be a cop. That one could be a cop. We just don't know. All right. I'll settle. Anything for you, my queen. Anything for you. I'll settle. I'm going slow. My phone is dying anyway. I'm still going to drive by your house in the middle of the night, though. And I dare you not to have your blinds open to check. I'm crazy. Maybe you'll never know if I did it. I'll do it.
The footage of him showing up to Kayla's house was right after one of his phone calls saying he's coming over, even though it was clear by this point she wanted nothing to do with him. Eventually, Kayla and her friend Ravon would find out that Thomas wasn't even his real name. His real name is Matthew. He'd been using the fake name Thomas Castle, which was a reference to the Marvel character The Punisher. Thomas was a reference to Thomas Jane, the second actor to play the Punisher, and Castle was a reference to Frank Castle, the Punisher's last name. The fact alone that he had been using a fake name with his friend and supposed love of his life was already a huge red flag, and maybe a sign that he was hiding something in his life. The ring footage was taken at 2 in the morning, and after leaving, he would go on to send some more texts, which would progressively get angrier. 4 days after this footage was taken, Kayla and her friend went to the police and filed for a restraining order. He left her alone about a month or so after the restraining order was put into place. Kayla blocked his number and blocked him on social media, and reportedly he basically disappeared from the world, and no one knows where he is now. This story was sent by Joseph Robinson and took place in 2017. He had just moved into his first apartment after moving out of his parents' house. It was an old 2-story home built in the 1930s and had been converted to 3 units, with 2 downstairs units and 1 upstairs unit. Joe was in the upstairs unit, which was a decent-sized 2-bedroom unit with a large kitchen and a pantry. He lived with his German Shepherd. At the time, only one of the bottom units was rented out, and he knew this because there was a car parked under one of the 3 spaces in the back of the building. That was the only way he could know someone was there, as they never left the house, and Joe knew this because he worked from home most days and did event photography during the night at a local theater. Throughout the time Joe would be home during the day, he never saw anyone leave the bottom unit, but he knew someone was there because he could hear the sounds of someone walking around and talking. After living there for almost 3 weeks, Joe started to notice strange things, like rustling in the living room walls and a thumping coming from the guest room. If he left the house, he would come back to find things moved around and sometimes missing. He had the management company change all the locks, but even after this, these strange things would continue. One night the theater was closed for repairs, so Joe didn't leave the house that night. Joe's brother needed to borrow his car as his was in the shop. The house was about a 10-minute walk from the downtown car garage where his brother had just left his car, so Joe's brother just walked over to borrow his car. The two caught up a bit, and then he took Joe's car to do whatever it was he had to do. Joe stayed inside for the rest of the day and got caught up on some editing he had been putting off. At around 9:30 p.m., he started to hear a voice down the stairs leading to the front door. The way the house was set up, there was a door that led outside a little entryway with a staircase that led to the actual apartment upstairs. This entryway shared a wall with the occupied unit upstairs. So Joe thought it was just the echo coming from the downstairs neighbor. However, it started to get louder and louder until he could clearly hear what the man was saying. He was arguing with himself and laughing hysterically. He kept telling himself it was time, only to follow up with a loud and aggressive no. Joe started to get a little freaked out and debated calling the police multiple times, but after about 45 minutes, he stopped and everything was quiet again. Feeling uneasy but too tired to stay up, Joe decided to call it a night early. On this night, Joe's dog was with him. She usually would stay at his parents' house when he wasn't home or when he'd leave at night for his photography work. But since he was off that night, she stayed with Joe the whole day. The two got into bed and went to sleep around 11 p.m., and it wasn't until around 4 a.m. that he woke up to the sound of his dog growling. Not a soft growl like when a dog sees a cat. Joe described it as a deep, rough, I'm gonna tear you apart kind of growl. He jumped up and went looking for her, and she was in the kitchen facing the pantry. As Joe rounded the corner, he heard the sound of a door slam in the pantry. However, once he got to the pantry, the door was still open. Joe's dog continued to growl and walked into the pantry and started pushing on the back shelf. Joe went in after her and turned on the light, and he noticed a very small gap between the back shelf and the wall of the pantry, and so he pushed on it, and this revealed a secret room behind the pantry. Joe's dog tried to run inside, but he caught her before she could go too far. There was a small hallway with a drop down at the end of it. Joe didn't go inside though. He called the police immediately. They came and he explained the situation. They went downstairs and got Joe's neighbor to open his door. What they found was disturbing. They found a large hunting knife and a panel missing from a wall in his closet that led to the room in Joe's pantry. The building owner said it was what was left after the renovation that turned the home into 3 units. Joe moved out that week. Shortly upon moving into their new home, a Utah couple found something that wasn't included on the listing for their home. That might sound exciting, but what they found, to them, was anything but exciting. The couple stumbled across a hidden room in their house, and it looked exactly like a torture dungeon. The couple found the entryway to this hidden den behind a pretty average-looking bookcase in a room that appears to be just an ordinary lounge. The wife/mother said that the bookcase positioned against the wall looked off, so she decided to try and move it elsewhere, and this was when she soon realized that the bookcase was actually secured on and was disguising a secret door that the couple had no idea existed. The room wasn't included on the listing, nor mentioned by the realtor or the previous owners of the home. The woman shared pictures on Reddit showing the stages of her opening the bookcase before revealing the creepy room lurking behind the wall. The image taken relies strictly on the flash from the phone's camera, but it shows the concrete room that contains one random fold-out chair sitting in the middle of the room. Various other objects can be seen around the space that led Reddit users at the time this was posted to speculate that the room could have been used as some kind of torture room, or even used as some kind of bunker for a killer. Of course, Reddit and the internet in general will always come up with wild theories, and while finding this room in your house would definitely be a bit creepy, there's no proof the room was ever used for malicious purposes. The couple later turned the room into a mini gym. However, a much more mysterious Reddit post that was posted 4 years ago in April of 2019 similarly shows a picture of an entrance to a hidden room in somebody's house. The only difference here is the Redditor who posted this never made a follow-up post or uploaded any pictures of what was beyond the door. The Redditor who shared this found this creepy-looking door hidden in his basement, and what made it extra weird was that there was a big metal shelf purposefully blockading the door, as if to deter anybody from entering. The Redditor claimed it was done so by the previous owner. The post contained no additional info, but what makes this whole thing stranger was that this was the last post to ever be made from this Reddit account. This was a pretty active Reddit account before this post. Because of this sudden disappearance after this already mysterious Reddit post, some people speculated that the person did in fact enter the room and found something in there. Something that may have led to his disappearance or death. People have tried to find out more details about the Redditor to find out where he lived and find any possible news articles relating to disappearances, but there has been no luck. For now, whatever happened here remains unknown. This next one comes from viewer Milad Hussein, who's a father of a teenage girl currently in military school. Recently, Milad had been cleaning out his house with his buddy Jacob, and suddenly out of nowhere, Jacob started yelling for Milad, saying that he found a small hidden door in his daughter's room. Milad had the permission from his daughter to clean her room before doing so. He was shocked to hear the words hidden door, and so he ran to his daughter's room and found Jacob in the closet. There was where Jacob found a secret doorway, which once opened, led to a stairway that led to a basement area that Milad had no idea of. His landlord never told him about it. Milad included this image of the stairs leading to the small basement. Once they got to the basement, they found themselves in a small room with a horrid smell. So horrid, in fact, that the two men considered leaving the basement altogether. Inside the basement was a small table covered in weird dark red stains with a big book, a total of 28 pens which had no ink left, and a mountain of trash with an old laptop on the table. The two men wondered if someone used to live down there a long time ago simply based off how old the laptop was. Milad then decided to look inside the book, and he was heavily disgusted by its contents. There were writings of somebody's plans to brutally slaughter the bullies from school, and he recognized the handwriting to be that of his daughter. One short passage in the book read, "Goodbye world, goodbye. There's nothing in this world. I'm useless. I have a Glock in my hand while writing this. I will pull the trigger anytime soon. I'm slowly destroying myself. Help me." On another page of the little diary, there was a note that said, "I will rip blank into shreds and drown her in her own blood. I have no remorse for what I'm doing. I am aware that I'm going to murder someone who caused me pain and shame for the past 9 years. You will regret it. Say hello to my new weapons." The third image from the diary he attached was a diagram of her school and her plan on targeting it and her bullies with her friend who was experiencing the same issues as her. Unfortunately, all the images were pretty blurry. I'd say it's safe to assume Malad confronted his daughter after finding these notes, but I was never able to get confirmation from him as he never replied to any of my emails, unfortunately. This last story comes from a viewer named Sal from Hope Mills, North Carolina. In the summer of 2022, he and his friend Connor moved into an upstairs apartment in a two-family home in town. They didn't sign a lease or anything. It was a listing they found on Facebook Marketplace that offered month-to-month rentals. Sal contacted the landlord Tom, who did not live in the house. There was a tenant already living in the downstairs apartment who drove a red pickup truck that was almost always in the driveway. The upstairs apartment was decent, nothing too modern or fancy, but they saw it as a nice temporary place to escape from their parents' houses. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, ample closet space, a living room, 1 bathroom, and a small kitchen. The 2 bedrooms were on opposite sides of the floor, with a long hallway connecting them, and the living room in the middle of the hallway. All of the rooms and the hallway were carpeted. There was a big closet in the hallway that would otherwise be used as a jacket closet, but given that they were only going to be there for the summer, they were going to use this as a small storage closet. Right from the get-go, Sal would feel like he'd be hearing noises coming from above the apartment, usually cracks in the wood that he would keep dismissing for normal house noises. But on one of the first nights in the apartment, right above Sal in his bed, he heard what he was almost positive were footsteps. The cracks in the floor were moving, and they were at a steady pace. Sal went over to Connor's room and knocked on the door to ask him if he was hearing the sounds too, but by this point, the cracks stopped. Sal freaked out Connor with this because they were already on the upper level. Anything above them would be the attic, but they were not told of any attic by the landlord. The next day, Sal texted Tom asking if there were an attic, and Tom replied no there wasn't, and that any sounds that would come from above would just be the pipes. So once again, Sal would dismiss the sounds he heard for house noises. The sounds would continue for a few nights. Then one day, after getting home from work, Sal was home alone. Even the downstairs tenant was out. So even in the seemingly empty house, there were clear as day footstep type sounds coming from above Sal's head. He decided to look around the place for a potential attic door. There were no attic doors in either of the bedrooms or living room. He checked the big closet in the hall, and he noticed something peculiar. There was a hanging plastic garbage bag blocking something. He moved it aside to realize there was a white door, and beyond the door was a stairway leading up to another door. Sal quietly went up the stairs and opened the rickety-looking wooden door at the top, and what was beyond the door was the last thing he ever expected. There was a cramped, unkempt-looking apartment up there. He caught just a glimpse of a small, dirty kitchen, a living room with a small, old sofa, and an open doorway that led into what he presumed to be a bedroom. Sal stated that it smelled like human waste up there, and the unbearable stench was about to chase him out of there anyway, before he heard cracks in the floor come from inside that small bedroom-looking room. Sal quickly left the floor back down the stairs he came up. He locked himself in his room and called 911. When the police got to the house, Sal let them up the stairs and showed them the secret passageway to the secret upstairs floor, and the police found a homeless-looking and smelling man in a small bedroom on the 3rd floor. When Sal told the landlord, he arrived on scene and came clean, explaining that the man on the 3rd floor was his troubled brother, and he needed a place for him to stay. The 3rd floor that was once an attic was secretly converted to a small living space, but it lacked a bathroom, hence the horrid smell. And according to what the police told Sal, there was human feces in the sink up there. Sal and Connor had only been in that apartment for a few days, but that would have meant at some point that man likely came down into their apartment and may have taken food from them. The landlord was arrested for breaching a number of tenant privacy rights, which even without a lease, month-to-month renters are still protected under these laws. Sal and Connor both pressed charges on top of this, and they moved out all of their stuff the same day this happened with the police nearby. A lot of horror movies are legitimately scary, but in some cases, the events that took place on the sets of certain horror movies were more terrifying than the movies themselves. A number of horrifying incidents have taken place on the sets of some of the most successful horror movies of all time, before, during, or shortly after filming. Whether these incidents were fatal accidents, cruel twists of fate, or some sort of evil curse still remains debatable. Perhaps a good place to start would be the Amityville Horror House, whose events may start to seem even scarier when you learn that horrors also took place on the sets for both the 1979 movie and the 2005 remake. The first Amityville movie starred James Brolin, who wasn't originally eager to take on the role, but eventually he accepted it because of something strange that happened. While reading the script one morning and getting to a scary section of the story, a pair of the actor's pants suddenly fell off a hanger, causing him to literally jump out of his chair in fright. James of course saw this as a sign that he needed to take the role, and the rest was history. Fast forward to the 2005 remake, with Ryan Reynolds taking on the part that was originally played by James Brolin. During filming, Ryan Reynolds, along with other cast members, claimed that every morning at exactly 3:15 a.m. they would wake up. The reason why that's terrifying is because 3:15 a.m. was the exact time that Ronald DeFeo murdered his entire family in the house. And it becomes a whole lot more creepy. At one point during filming, there was also an actual dead body that washed up near the filming set in the boathouse in the backyard of the house. Actors and crew members always suspected that there was an otherworldly presence during the filming of the movie. Whether they were right or just overly paranoid, who knows? The 2012 film The Possession is an unconventional horror movie that involves rabbis, Judaism, and a cursed Jewish relic called Dybbuk box that attaches itself to a young girl. A Dybbuk box is a wine cabinet claimed to be haunted by a Dybbuk, which is a malevolent wandering spirit that enters and possesses the body of a living person until exorcised. What happened on the set of The Possession left even the star of the movie, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, feeling very uneasy, and he already had a lot of experience acting in horror movies and shows under his belt. Some of the seemingly supernatural things that happened included lights exploding for no apparent reason, as well as chilly breezes wafting through closed sets for no particular reason. But the scariest incident occurred when the storage facility where all the movie props were being held caught fire and burned to the ground. A team of investigators concluded that the fire was not started from an electrical fault or arson, but the actual cause for the fire couldn't be determined. The Dybbuk box used in the movie, which played an important role in the movie, was destroyed in the fire, and the cast and crew later refused to allow the movie's producers to replace the Dybbuk box for fear that it was cursed. The Conjuring is a movie that's supposed to be based on the true story of the Perron family, who claimed to be tormented by supernatural entities in their Rhode Island home in the 70s. While several of the family members spent time on the set during filming, the mother refused to go anywhere near it, as she was convinced that several unexplained events that plagued the filming of this movie on set were proof that the spirits hadn't finished with them yet. For instance, when members of the Perron family were visiting, a furious gust of wind suddenly rose and seemed to swirl around them. However, nobody could see any movement in any of the trees just opposite them, movement you'd expect to see from any normal gust of wind. Just a couple days later, the hotel that the actors and movie crew were staying in caught fire and everyone had to be evacuated. And it doesn't end there. James Wan, the movie's director, recalls working late in his office one evening when his dog started growling at something. He would get up to investigate, but he couldn't find anything that would be antagonizing the dog. However, the dog had his sights on something across the room. It seemed he had focused on an unseen entity in one corner of the room. James took a break from working after this, having been legitimately freaked out. Vera Farmiga, who played the role of a paranormal investigator in the film, refused to take the script home with her, as she said it made her feel uneasy. She also couldn't read it at night because she became paralyzed by fear whenever she tried. After a phone call discussion with James Wan, Vera opened her laptop screen, and there were 3 digital claw marks from the upper right diagonal to the lower left. This wasn't the last time it happened, though. Her next experience came a few months later, literally on the day that she completed work on The Conjuring. She returned home to upstate New York, and when she woke up the next day, she discovered what she describes as 3 claw-mark bruises across her thigh. In 1983, a movie based on the Twilight Zone series was released. During filming, actor Vic Morrow was killed on the set. Deaths on movie sets have happened many times, but what makes this extra disturbing is the fact that Morrow appeared to predict his demise just a year earlier. A year before filming of the Twilight Zone movie began, Vic took out a $5 million life insurance policy on himself, explaining to friends and family members that he had a premonition something bad was going to happen to him on an upcoming movie. He had seen it in a dream he had. Unfortunately, his premonition came true, because while filming a scene involving a helicopter for The Twilight Zone, the helicopter crashed and decapitated him. 2 child actors were also killed in the accident, which prompted a lengthy investigation and court case. It was later revealed in court that the movie's concept artist unintentionally drew an identical image in his sketches to what actually happened, a burned-out helicopter in the middle of a river, essentially foreshadowing the accident. The accident led to civil and criminal action against the filmmakers, which lasted nearly a decade. One of the children's fathers testified that he heard John Landis, the director, instructing the helicopter to fly lower. All 4 parents testified that they were never told that there would be helicopters or explosives on set, and they had been assured that there would be no danger, only a lot of noise. John Landis and 4 other crew members would be found not guilty on the 3 charges of manslaughter, having been the first time a director was charged due to a fatality on a film set. The 1976 film The Omen is another horror classic following the tale of a young boy named Damien Thorne, who was replaced at birth by his father unbeknownst to his wife, after their biological child died shortly after birth. As a series of mysterious events and violent deaths occur around the family and Damien enters childhood, they come to learn he's in fact the Antichrist. The film almost wasn't going to be completed due to an alleged curse that surrounded filming of the movie. So many horrible things happened on the set of The Omen that it can be comparable to the amount of bad things to happen in the movie. The tragedies began with the son of the lead actor Gregory Peck taking his own life as soon as filming began. The next incident was when a crew member suffered major injuries after getting into a car accident while driving to the set. But the tragedies didn't stop there. The scriptwriter's airplane was struck by lightning en route to the film's location. And if that weren't enough, an airplane in which Gregory Peck and the movie's executive producer were traveling in was also struck by lightning in a separate incident. Harvey Bernhard, the producer, was on location in Rome when he was almost hit by a bolt of lightning himself, and believe it or not, the horrible luck involving airplanes continued, and it got much worse. One day, the crew had decided to use a private airplane to get from one film location to the other. However, just after the plane took off with a number of the crew on board, something went wrong and the plane went down, crashing into a road and hitting a car, which then crashed at a high speed into another vehicle. All 11 people involved in the accident were killed. Another tragic death associated with the movie set was that of Liz Moore. John Richardson, the Omen special effects expert, was driving through the Netherlands with Liz Moore when they were involved in a terrible car accident. Richardson escaped with very minor injuries, but Moore's head was completely severed when a tire smashed into their vehicle. This incident was eerily reminiscent of a scene in The Omen, in which the character Keith Jennings, investigating Damien's supernatural origins, is decapitated by a sheet of glass that comes loose from a vehicle on a construction site. Richardson later reported that just before the crash, he passed a road sign that read Omen 66.6 kilometers. Make of that what you will, but there's no denying that it's not too far off to speculate that the production of The Omen may have been cursed. That, or it was all just an outrageous coincidence. All that can be said for sure is that The Omen is a very iconic movie, and the chilling tales that surround its production have only helped to cement that legacy. It's crazy to think how Cheryl Bradshaw's gut instincts that something was off about Rodney probably saved her life. One person on the stage was not who he seemed, and his name was Rodney Alcala, a serial killer. He was introduced as Bachelor Number 1, a successful photographer.
Will that date be Bachelor Number 1, Bachelor Number 2, or Bachelor Number 3? Who gets the dates?
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take one.
Investigators estimated his victims could be as many as 130, but Alcala had fled and enrolled in the NYU Film School using the name John Berger. With his good looks and charm, he persuaded many young women to pose in photographs for him, most of whom are presumed to have been victims of his, and apparently a lot of them remain unidentified. Somehow, Alcala was able to make it on the dating show despite his criminal history.
She said, Ellen, I can't go out with this guy. There's weird vibes that are coming off of him. He's very strange. I'm not comfortable. Is that going to be a problem?
This video is going to be a little different from my others, in that I'm going to focus on one story instead of 3. Now to begin, everyone knows what a crawl space is, whether you have one or you don't. An unoccupied narrow space within a home between the ground and the first floor, usually in place of a basement and used for storage. Usually the scariest things you'd find in a crawl space would be rodents or giant spider crickets jumping at you. But Jake Binger found something much more disturbing than any creepy creatures in his crawl space. In a nice area of Firestone, Colorado, Jake owns his own house where his girlfriend lives with him. Jake had met his girlfriend, who remains nameless, at a comedy club in town, and the two hit it off and would eventually start to date. At some point during this time, she opened up to him about her old abusive ex. She described her ex as a ticking time bomb, how he could at times be very sweet, and that she loved his more gentle side, but that he could switch to a completely different person just like a flick of a switch. And in this alternate personality of his, he was a very aggressive, scary man who would do things like fight bouncers at bars or punch holes in walls when angry, or even sometimes getting physical with her, and he got angry rather easily. Things would become so rocky between the two that eventually she would end things with her ex, but he didn't take that news well. She feared that her ex was stalking her parents' house at late hours of the night because either she or her parents would hear sounds from the backyard, like the gate slamming shut or the backyard shed door closing. Her ex disabled all forms of social media after the breakup, and she became so concerned for her well-being that she decided to move in with her current boyfriend Jake. Now you may be wondering, what does this have to do with anything? Well, on one regular night that Jake's girlfriend wasn't in the house with him, he was in his living room when he heard noises from in the crawl space. He moved from his living room to his kitchen and sat at the island for a while, continuing to listen and hearing strange occasional thumping sounds from directly below him. It was at this time that he started to record a video for his Snapchat story, assuming what he was hearing was an animal of some kind, such as a raccoon. As he enters his crawl space, he stops recording for a second so that he could take another video with the flash on so that he could navigate the crawl space. The crawl space appears to be mostly empty aside from some boxes that were tucked into one corner. Jake says when he saw these boxes this way, he was confused because he didn't remember leaving them that way. As Jake walks deeper into the crawl space where the left side expands further down, Jake says he heard a noise in one corner, like pebbles being scraped on the concrete floor. As he heard the noise, he turned to the corner where he saw the terrifying sight of a hunched over man dressed in all black, who was hiding in the corner behind a wall, now getting up and approaching Jake. Jake's scream sounded like a legitimate scream from somebody witnessing something as disturbing as an intruder hiding in their crawl space and then basically lunging at them. The video cuts out seconds later, as being that it was a Snapchat video. Once he let go of the record button, the video stopped. At this point, Jake explained that he ran back to the ladder of the crawl space, and as he climbed up, the man grabbed his foot and tried to pull him down. But Jake managed to kick his way out of the grip and slam the crawl space door in his face. Unfortunately, the door to the closet, which contained the crawl space door, didn't have a lock, so Jake's first instinct was to run to the kitchen and grab the biggest knife, then lock himself inside the bathroom. He heard the closet door open and then footsteps come over to the bathroom door, and then the man on the other side of the door try the doorknob. Not knowing what kind of weapons the person might have had, Jake didn't engage the intruder in a fight. Instead, he silently called 911 and kept the line going, and eventually, he heard footsteps quickly leave the house out the front door. Now Jake told the 911 operator about the break-in, and so police came to the house, conducted a quick investigation, and a police report was created for the incident. Jake's girlfriend refused to come to the house after hearing of the incident, because she swore left and right that the man had to be her ex. It's impossible to make out any notable facial features on the man in the video. Jake says he saw that the man was wearing a black mask and his head was covered by a hood, which you can kind of see in the video. Jake also described the man to have a very tall-looking, intimidating stature, despite his hunched-over posture in the crawl space. Jake's girlfriend's ex was a very tall man, and upon watching the video, she swears it looks just like his body. Of course, this is just speculation on her part, and without solid evidence, legally they don't have much of a leg to stand on as far as pressing charges. In the video though, loud thumping and hammering type sounds could be heard in the beginning. And after investigating, Jake found that the intruder had ripped through some of the insulation of the crawl space and had been hammering at some of the wood in the ceiling of the crawl space, and also some of the pipes. It's unknown why he was doing this. It was also discovered that the key that the couple hides in one of their sheds outside was missing, which already revealed how the intruder got inside, and might insinuate that the man who broke in had his eyes on the house for a while. Jake changed the locks on the door that same day, but his girlfriend has yet to return to that house, worried that it's now being stalked by her crazy ex-boyfriend. Jake has installed the Ring doorbell camera recently, and on several occasions, he's gotten a notification from his Alexa device that there's someone at his front door, but there's never anybody actually there. Not visibly, at least. While there isn't any solid evidence as to who the intruder was, it may be a strong possibility that it is in fact her ex-boyfriend. What started as a guy simply trying to get a funny Snapchat story of what he assumed to be a raccoon in his crawl space turned into something much more horrifying. The start of a nightmare, even. Jake said he would keep me updated on the matter, so if any new information comes up, I'd consider making a follow-up if you guys would be interested. The man you're looking at is 56-year-old Stephen Groves. For 2 whole years, Groves has been harassing his disabled neighbor Stephen Persad and his caretakers. The harassment has been caught on Persad's Ring doorbell camera multiple times. In some clips, he's seen taking a screwdriver to the device trying to clip its wires. In another clip, he's seen scrawling on the lens with a marker to no effect. And in these instances, whacking the device with a hammer or broom handle. The reason behind the man's attacks on his neighbor's property are unknown. Over the past 6 months, Groves has been convicted of 3 charges of harassment against Persad, and has been put on a curfew and ordered to pay compensation for damages to Persad's property. Stephen Persad's niece is terrified for her uncle, having stated this is affecting her mental health and she's scared that Groves may have intentions to harm her uncle. The restraining order that was put into place is clearly having no effect, as Groves is still harassing Prasad. On top of the restraining order, Groves has been put on an electric tag for the better part of a year and was also ordered 20 weeks of rehabilitation. Police don't seem to be able or willing to do anything more to help, considering this has already been taken to court and Groves has been convicted multiple times, leaving Prasad in a very vulnerable spot. The crazy can be seen in this man's eyes, and it's understandable for Prasad and his niece to be losing sleep over this, as this is a clearly dangerous, unstable man who may escalate from just attacking Prasad's property to actually attacking him. This next video was recorded in an unknown area at a late hour in the night. Two hooded, suspicious-looking individuals, one wearing a mask, approach a man's front door, and when he answers, the woman pretends that her car broke down and she needs to borrow a phone.
Hello, do y'all have a phone I can use? My car broke down, and y'all's the only one that got a light on.
We don't.
You don't?
Sorry.
The man's first mistake is opening the door at this hour to two hooded individuals, being that his Ring camera would have allowed him to check who's at the door before opening it. Instead of opening the door, if he felt the need to respond to the people at his front door, he could have and should have used the voice feature on his Ring device to ask who they were and what they need. Instead, the man opens the door, and while admittedly he knew better than to agree to let them use a phone,
We don't.
You don't?
Sorry.
opening the door in the first place was a mistake, as the man in the yellow hoodie and mask took the opportunity to rush the door with a gun after taking one last look to the right to check for witnesses. Luckily, the homeowner slammed the door shut just in time, and the two would-be assailants fled the scene. In this case, the homeowner saved himself from robbery and danger just by the skin of his teeth, and hopefully learned to check who's at his door before answering. If you've seen any of my other videos about doorbell camera footage, then you'd know the importance of checking your surroundings before unlocking and opening your door, especially depending on the area in which you live. In this video taken by the Ring doorbell camera of TikToker Jojo Ramirez, you see just how close she and her child were from danger, and how the only thing between her and a creepy man was her front door, which she locked with only seconds to spare. "Who is that? Get out of here."
Who is that? Get out of here!
She then exclaims to her son, "There's a guy outside, look."
There's a guy outside! Look!
As Jojo shouts for him to leave, he backs up, but boldly continues firmly standing in front of the door with his haunting blank expression, not saying a word. The man came out of nowhere so quickly that it could be that he was following them for a while, or perhaps was waiting for them to return. It's anybody's guess what would have happened if the door wasn't locked in time, but a pretty strong assumption would be the man was after Daniel, Jojo's young son. This footage was viewer submitted, and it was taken by their Ring doorbell in a nice, otherwise quiet neighborhood in the Netherlands. The viewer was in bed on an ordinary night, when he heard noises on the roof. Thinking it could have been an animal, he ignored it and went to sleep. The next morning, this was the footage he found after seeing the notifications from his Ring doorbell from the night before. In the video are 3, maybe 4 young men trespassing on his property, 2 of them climbing the roof, while the other of the 3 who were visible, whispering to 1 or more people out of view of the camera. Luckily, this was a cold night and all the windows in the house were closed, because it was clear they were trying to burglarize the house when scratch marks were found on 2 of the upstairs windows, as if someone was attempting to lift them open. Given that there were 3 or 4 of them, they could have posed a serious threat if they were to have entered the home. After viewing the video, The viewer made sure to keep his windows all locked the following nights, and a few nights later, he woke up to the sound of someone attempting to open a downstairs window, this time not caught by the Ring camera. The footage was submitted to the police in hopes that they could identify them based on their faces. I was asked to blur their faces by the viewer, just so that if any of the perpetrators were to see this video, they wouldn't come back to the house again for any type of revenge. This one is perhaps one of the simpler yet scarier clips caught by a doorbell camera, despite how quick it is. Not many details are known, like where this took place, but this was uploaded by the neighbor of the owner of the Ring camera. In the video, we see in the dead of night a masked, young-looking man approach the front door of a house with a gun in his hand, stand there for only a few seconds, clearly contemplating what he was about to do, then backing out probably in fear and leaving. The owner of the house didn't know who this was, but this was probably a person working up to an armed robbery, possibly having his sights specifically on this house. Of course, without all the details, that's just speculation, and there could be a whole lot of other explanations as to what's going on here. However, regardless, the chances of this guy or any other person with a gun coming back shouldn't be taken lightly, and that kind of footage should be submitted to the police immediately. Snapchat has become a staple in today's social media world. It's a convenient way to contact friends and keep in touch with people. But as we've seen over and over on this channel, there can be a few privacy concerns if you're not careful. Let's just jump right into it and look at 3 disturbing snaps people have received and their backstories. For the sake of the person who sent me this, I'll refer to her as Maria. Maria has an Instagram account with 5,000 followers, which is a decent amount, and so she gets a good amount of attention on her profile from men. Maria has a boyfriend who has not appeared in any pictures of hers on her Instagram. Maria also had her Snapchat username in her Instagram bio, something a lot of people do to allow their acquaintances and friends to add them on the app with ease. This can also open the door to unwanted contact, though. Although she didn't add everybody back who added her on Snap, she at one point had her privacy settings set to allow all people to send her messages and snaps, even people she didn't add back. So, somewhat often she'd receive messages and snaps from random guys, usually guys that followed her on Instagram. In her words, often older and creepy looking. But according to her, even younger guys managed to look creepy by taking weird angled selfies in dark rooms. Usually the snaps were pretty harmless like this, but one day she received a snap that would lead to her getting the police involved. Maria lives with her family, but often stays at her boyfriend's first-floor apartment. This location is not known to anybody except for her close friends who know of her boyfriend, making it all the more disturbing when she received this snap. It was a picture taken through the window to her boyfriend's bedroom. At the time the photo was taken, it's hard to see it in the dark, but Maria was in the bed napping, and her boyfriend was in the living room watching football. There was no caption to the Snapchat, making it appear to be some kind of subtle threat. Maria didn't open the snap until much later in the night while going through snaps she'd received from various people she didn't know. By this time, it was a couple hours after the snap had been sent. She panicked and screenshotted the snap and showed it to her boyfriend. From here, he replied to the account on her phone, asking who is this. Upon adding the person back, they saw the account had a pretty high snap score, which for those of you who may not know, a person's snap score represents how many times they have received or sent a snap. This account having a snap score in the 50,000 range meant it wasn't likely just a random spam account. The person replied, "John, LOL." Maria's boyfriend replied back, "We're calling the police," and John replied, "K cool, let me know if you need help calling them." After this, the account blocked her, and the couple were left to wonder who this person was. A search through Maria's Instagram followers turned up multiple Johns, but with no last name on the account, it would simply be a guess as to who it could be. That same night, as the couple was sleeping, a crash from the living room woke them up. As Maria's boyfriend ran to check the source of the noise, he found it was the dining room window, which had been shattered, and on the floor was a house brick, presumed to have been taken from a house being renovated down the block. If the couple didn't have a case before, they definitely did now, and they called 911 to report the incident. Now that a police report had been made, police would subpoena Snapchat for information on this person's account in hopes to locate the person. The couple was assigned a detective to their case who was supposed to help in identifying the mystery person. However, as the days turned into weeks, little to no information was given. It did become apparent, however, that the Snapchat account had been either deleted or banned because it no longer came up under search results. Currently, Maria and her boyfriend have no idea who this person was, and any thought of it being a prank by a friend was out the window when their window was literally shattered by a brick. It can boil down to a stalker being jealous of her boyfriend, but this would also mean that Maria was followed to her boyfriend's house, and that the perpetrator would know where she lives as well. Luckily, with security cameras becoming more prevalent on houses, these kinds of crimes are becoming more difficult to get away with. But in cases like this, where there's an absence of any cameras, unfortunately people may still be able to pull these kinds of crimes off. 3 months later, and Maria and her boyfriend haven't seen any new activity at either of their homes. This next story comes from a college student named Tom from the University of Kentucky. Tom shares his location on the Snap Map feature, which if you've been around my channel for a while, you know how things can sometimes turn out with that. Tom lives in a house off campus with 4 friends in a downtown area by a bunch of bars. The squad of guys often walk to and from these bars at night on the weekends. The night in question was no exception. Tom was on his way home from a nearby college bar, about a 15-minute walk from the house. At some point while walking home, he was on a quiet residential street with woods on one side, and he heard someone walking behind him. He turned to see a man holding out something in front of him, walking about 10 meters behind him. He couldn't tell what he was holding, but he didn't stare for too long because he didn't want to draw negative attention to himself. He noted that something about the sight of the man seemed ominous, though. The man was behind Tom for a while, until he turned to the block with his house on it. At some point before making it back, the man was no longer behind him, at least not that he thought. It was only after he made it back inside the house that he got a notification that he received a snap from his friend Luke, one of his housemates, who was home at the time. Luke had lost his phone that night though, so receiving a snap from his Snapchat account meant that somebody had his phone. Tom called his housemates downstairs before opening the video. He also turned a screen recorder on to capture the snap, and this is what they saw. The snap was a video of Tom walking down the street towards his house. It was the man he had seen walking behind him, and what he was holding out in front of him was apparently Luke's phone. They had the idea to check the location of Luke's phone on the Snap Map, since he had his location enabled, as did Tom. The location of his Bitmoji was last updated 9 minutes ago, and its location was right on top of their house. So the 3 guys who were currently home ran around the entire property with all the outside lights on to light up the area. They didn't find the man with the phone, but oddly enough, Luke's Bitmoji moved just a tad as it updated again, yet it was still on top of the house, meaning whoever had the phone had to be somewhere that they were overlooking. After a while, the guys thought to lock the phone using the Find My iPhone feature, and then have it play as sound. When they did this, they were confused to hear the beeping sound of the phone coming from inside the house, followed by stomping of someone's shoes and the front door slamming shut. Luke's beeping phone was still inside the house, but instead of going straight for that, the 3 guys ran outside to chase after whoever just ran out the front door. By the time they made it out onto the street, they had no idea which way the person went. They were out of sight and they could have been hiding anywhere. After checking the neighbors' yards, the guys went back inside to retrieve Luke's beeping phone, and Tom claims they found it right in the pantry closet, meaning the man was hiding in there for however long. At first, one could have maybe assumed that the person who had the phone was trying to return it, until it was discovered that that person was literally hiding in their house. Assuming all the details in the story are true, if I had to guess, the man who had stolen Luke's phone knew who he was somehow and was following Tom through his SnapMap Bitmoji location all the way up to their house. There are some missing details though, like how the phone was stolen, what the method of entry to the house was, and if Luke and the rest of the guys in the house had any sort of enemies or people out to get them. No police action was taken apparently. In 2015, an Australian Redditor with username Skinna555 took 3 Snapchat videos of his parents' exotic birds and put them on a Snapchat story. What followed next was downright disturbing. Skinner and his girlfriend recently moved into his childhood home with his parents while their own house was being built. Skinner's parents owned 3 Australian parrots, and one night while he was home alone, he uploaded 3 Snapchat stories showing off the birds, since many people always asked about the birds.
I'd say the first one of my parents' little birds is this little guy. It is little Leo. He's a cockatiel. The second little bird of my parents is a rainbow lorikeet. His name is Oliver. And there he is. And here I am with my good little mate, Puffin.
About 15 minutes after uploading the videos to his story, Skinner receives a text from one of his friends. And at the bottom of it, it says, "By the way, what was that in the window behind you in the last one?" So after seeing this text, he went to rewatch the clips a couple of times and opened them on his computer to get a larger and clearer view of the videos. In the last snap, it almost appears as if someone is at the door, looking in with their hands cupped against it. But it's hard to say for sure because of how briefly the door is in the frame. But whatever it was not in the first snap when that same door was in full frame. Skinner was home alone at the time, and to add to the mystery, that door led to the backyard, which was only accessible through a single gate which had been locked. The theory that it might have been a reflection doesn't hold up, because the sliding glass door was half open, and all that stood between the figure and the inside of the room was the fly screen door, which would not have been able to cast any reflections. Whatever was at that door moved in the matter of seconds that passed between the first and third snap. When Skinner was a young child, around 10, he started to commonly experience sleep paralysis, which could get so intense that he'd find himself often not being able to breathe for short periods of time. And this led to a fear of sleeping for him. A couple years went by, and his sleep paralysis tendencies would worsen. During his episodes, he could not move and felt like something that meant him harm was in the room with him. Around the age of 14, he started to hear and see things like thuds and creaks. However, he always had one recurring vision, a faceless person looking in his bedroom window with their hands cupped up to the glass, similar to this image caught in his Snap story. When he moved out at age 18, he never had another episode. So for a few days after these snaps, nothing happens. But come Friday night, Skinner found himself home alone again. At around 10:15 p.m., while playing games on Steam with his friends, he starts to hear some relatively loud banging. Loud enough that he could hear it even through his headset. It was coming from the screen door outside. He got up to film the sounds using his phone. The noises got louder and more frequent. Instead of outright opening the curtains and potentially finding himself face to face with someone on the other side, he walked through the kitchen into the laundry room to turn on the outside lights. Like I mentioned earlier, there's only one entry and exit to the backyard, the left side of the house through a locked gate. So with the back lights now on, he went over to a window that looks out to that one exit of the backyard. While waiting and expecting to see someone rushing out of the yard, a loud noise can be heard from outside on the opposite side of the house. He aims the camera at the window for a few moments, then turns on the kitchen lights, and seconds later stops recording. He kept all the lights on until his parents returned home. He uploaded the videos to Reddit, and people started to help in examining the videos. After a few Redditors enhanced the videos, a big mass in the corner was revealed in the dining room. The figure begins to resemble a person. And to make it creepier, that figure is not there at the end of the video. Skinner called the police, and the video freaked even them out. They believed that a two-man team tried to rob his parents while they were away. Theoretically, when one would-be robber broke in and realized Skinner was home, the second one tried to make noise to lure him inside. And when it didn't work, he snuck out and escaped. Skinner doesn't entirely trust this theory, mainly because all the doors and windows were locked from the inside when they came in. So how exactly would these guys have gotten in? Years later, this just remains to be another internet mystery. and what actually went down, we may never know.
I was 23 years old when this happened. I'm 27 now, and there hasn't been a week that has gone by that I haven't thought about this trip. To celebrate our friend Andrew's 21st birthday, we were taking him on a trip to Vegas. He was always a laid-back and kind of shy dude, and we all knew that he hadn't yet done the deed, so we planned on getting him really drunk and to put it bluntly, get him laid. We checked into the Carriage House Hotel, which was one of the more affordable hotels that we could find. We had 2 separate rooms as there were 7 of us in total. There were 4 of us in the room that I was in. Andrew was in the room with us. The first thing we did was eat, of course, as we were all starving. We then hit the casinos just to say that we did it. Out of the 7 of us, only 1 of us left with more money than entering. We checked out a bunch of different bars, and as the night went on, things got more blurry and everything got funnier. We got into a nightclub that was going wild. We caught 2 of our friends, John and Eddie, walking out with girls. They shot us the about to get lucky look, and we understood. The rest of us were trying to pressure Andrew into approaching a girl, but even in his drunk and somewhat loosened up state, he was still too shy to approach anybody or even dance. We got to the point where we were desperate to find somebody for Andrew. We could already foresee that he wouldn't meet any girls at this rate the whole trip. We left the club in search for a working girl. You may think our actions were weird, but as most people were by that time, we were completely hammered. We approached a girl walking alone. Acting like a couple of retards, asked the girl if she would be interested in hanging out with our friend Andrew, who was very noticeably not quite as messed up as us, but still intoxicated nonetheless. The girl wasn't anything special. I could say that even in the state I was in. But we wanted Andrew to have a good time. I don't quite remember what she said in direct response to me, but I remember her voice being slightly deep to the point that I looked at my friend. I also have this slight memory of her analyzing Andrew from head to toe. Again, I don't remember what she said, but it led to her grabbing Andrew's arm and the 2 of them walking off down the sidewalk. We laughed as we could see how awkward Andrew already felt. None of us thought it was weird what just happened though. But just out of curiosity, to see what was going to go down, we decided to trail behind them. They didn't seem to exchange any words. In fact, it appeared as if the girl was pulling him. We followed for about 15 minutes, I would guess. It could have been much longer, but I wouldn't really know. It was a darker and quieter street. The 2 of them stepped into what we assumed was an apartment building, and we all laughed. But we were so proud and happy for him too. There was no point in us waiting there, so we went back to the club. At around 2 in the morning, we headed back to the hotel. Andrew wasn't in either of the rooms. I was starting to sober up a little, and a bit of concern began to arise in me. John and Eddie, who weren't with us earlier, were shocked to hear about what happened. We all kind of assumed Andrew was just spending the night with the girl. Still, it was out of character for Andrew doing anything like this, so it was just weird. I texted him and tried calling him. He never answered, but my friends told me to relax. I crashed minutes later. I woke to a ringing sound. At first, with my mind still in sleep mode, I assumed it to be an alarm clock and tried tapping at my phone to turn it off. As my head began to return to reality, I realized the phone was ringing. It was Andrew's number. I literally felt my heart drop for whatever reason. I told my friends who were already awake from the ringing. I answered, and was greeted to heavy breathing on the other end. It was Andrew, and he sounded as if he were having some kind of panic attack. I put him on speakerphone so everyone could hear. Andrew began whispering into the phone. Most of it was incomprehensible, but we made out some of what he said. We heard him whisper, "It was that woman. Guys, you gotta get over here right now." We tried to engage him, but he wasn't answering anything we were saying. The other end went silent. We were all basically screaming into the phone, asking if he was alright, where he was, what was going on. I was already shaking in my skin at that point, but what happened next only made it 10 times worse. Something broke the silence on the other end. The sound of a door being opened with force, followed by the shrill and horrific screaming of Andrew, before the sound of the call ending. We were all freaking the fuck out. I called the police and tried to remember the address, or at least the street. We were so messed up last night that I couldn't even remember the route that we took. One of my friends claimed he did though. The police came over to the hotel and they escorted us. My friend seemed to remember exactly where the building was. He guided the police past the club, down the side roads, and eventually to the building. 2 officers from the front car went inside. We were to wait by the other car. A few minutes felt like hours, waiting in anticipation and in fear of the worst. One of the officers stepped out. She came over to us and asked us to come inside to confirm if the dead body belonged to Andrew. I felt like the entire world just collapsed on my head as John and Jerry both started crying. They didn't want to go in, so I followed the officer into the building, which turned out wasn't an apartment at all, rather some kind of dark, abandoned storage building. There was the dead body, leaning out from the open closet, the emotionless face, mouth lifelessly hung open, staring up at the ceiling. It was horrible, but it wasn't Andrew. I knew it right away. The most noticeable feature, this boy had blonde hair, while Andrew had black hair. The officers had already scoped the whole place out, so they didn't know what to do. I took a look in the closet that I had a feeling Andrew was hiding in. Nothing. Not even his cell phone. We all did our best to forget about it, but a little more than a month later, I got a phone call during the middle of the night once again. I picked up. There was a bad reception and nobody was saying anything. I was about to hang up when a faint yet familiar voice said, "Jesse?" "Andrew?" I yelled. The sound of a door slamming in the background on the other end was the last thing I heard before the call ended. He didn't pick up after the 5 times I tried ringing him. So what did I do? I called the police and had them trace the call. The call was not coming from Nevada at all. No, it was coming from New Jersey. In fact, our own town, and a house not too far away. They said they were sending somebody to the house, but that wasn't enough for me. I had to go there myself. I GPSed that address, hopped in my car, and floored it the whole 5 minutes it took to reach the address. It was a vacant house on a corner. I sneaked up to the front door and put my ear against it to listen for anything inside. Nothing. I crawled around back where I found an open window. I listened for a moment. There were the sounds of small snaps and cracks from upstairs. The kinds of sounds you hear from somebody standing or moving on wood. I was sure that he was in there. I hopped inside, but I didn't even get to begin my search before noticing something at the edge of the hallway. Somebody was standing there, facing me, but I couldn't see their face. All I could see were their pale, exposed legs and long black hair down past their shoulders. It was a woman. I was feeling sick to my stomach, anticipating her charging up to me like in some kind of horror movie, but instead, she turned and ran in the opposite direction. I heard the sound of a door slamming shut, followed by footsteps stomping downstairs, and then yelling of a man and woman. There was an even heavier pair of footsteps now stomping up the stairs. That was my cue to run. I left the house and dove into the bush. Not even 5 seconds later, someone stepped out onto the porch, and for the first time in months, it seemed as if luck was finally on my side as a police car pulled up to the curb, flashing its siren. I heard the guy in the stoop mutter, "Shit," before slamming the door behind himself. The police followed inside. Apparently the idiot didn't even lock the door. I stayed hidden, as I didn't want to startle the cops and end up with a bullet in my skull. I waited by the car out front, and minutes later, one of the officers came outside with the guy in cuffs. I introduced myself and warned that there was also a woman in there, but they never found the woman. In fact, one of the bedroom windows were completely open, which implied that she escaped. Andrew was found upstairs, locked in a closet. He was in horrible shape, malnourished, hair long and dirty. You could smell him from a mile away. The police ran the records for the man. He was never married, so they really had no way of finding out who the woman was. He even claimed that he had only known her for a day. Nothing made sense, and it still doesn't. Andrew admitted that he was raped, beaten, and hardly fed. I can't even imagine admitting something like that to someone. The girl that originally escorted him to that building was only there to collect payment from what he described as the operators. For some reason, they forced Andrew to give them his hometown and addresses of everyone that was with him that night, which explained why they were in our town, but not actually why they were in our town. Like, what their intentions were. To kill us? To add us to whatever kind of sex slave operation they were running? I'm the only person he's told out of our group of friends, and whenever somebody asked about it, I just said I don't know what happened. Things were finally starting to look up, when a few days later, I got a text message from a random number one late night, saying, "Fuck you." Whoever it was blocked me, as I couldn't respond, so I just blocked them back. It happened again the next week, and then the next month. Sure, I had the idea that it had something to do with the incident, but I had no idea it would be taken as far as it was. I woke up one night with a hint of brightness in my room. There was light from outside, in the backyard, shining ever so slightly through the closed blinds. It wasn't sunlight. It was the backyard porch light. I could see a shadow moving in front of the blinds. Somebody was definitely out there. I couldn't really see out of the crack at the bottom of the blind, so I inched it up ever so slightly. There was somebody standing by the window, looking right at me, as if they were waiting for me. But they were gone before I could even think about grabbing my phone to get a picture of them. I strongly believe it was that woman I saw in the house. That was the last time I saw or heard from anyone involved in this shit. Nothing of this whole situation has made a single ounce of sense, even with the best explanation Andrew could give me. I don't see a point in getting into how Andrew and everyone else is doing, as it's nothing interesting. The only thing I can say is I'm waiting for the next time I see any of these animals, and I'll be ready to call the police or take them on myself.
In 2014, a man named Ethan and his wife Danny were spending a weekend together on Vancouver Island, which they had done many times before. The couple has a lot of experience on the island and just camping in general. Vancouver Island provides an optimal camping setting because of its mix of scenic beaches and dense forest. The couple had many successful camping trips on the island, until something truly terrifying happened to them on their final outing on the islands. Ethan and Danny were far from any roads or civilization, enjoying the solitude. They set up camp on a beach a good distance from anywhere and kept a fire going. To get to the trail leaving the beach was 1 kilometer along the beach and 2 kilometers to the road through the forest. The couple had met another camper named Leon from New Zealand, who they ran into earlier that day on the beach. Leon was planning on sleeping in his van, which he parked back up on the road. The couple invited him down to the beach for a fire, and the three shared a bottle of wine, talking amongst themselves around the fire. This is where things started to get a little creepy. The sun was starting to go down by this point, and the trio kept hearing what sounded like female voices from behind them in the bushes dividing the beach from the forest. It wasn't too dark out yet though, so it was still possible that they were just other hikers or campers nearby, or even a group who anchored offshore and the sound was just bouncing in a weird way. All three of them could agree that they were hearing female voices though. On that note, it was getting late and a little dark, so Leon said goodbye and set out to hike back to his car before it was too dark. Ethan and Danny stayed by their campsite and stoked the fire because Danny was starting to get creeped out by the voices, which continued on into the darkness. It sounded like two female voices speaking, but whatever that was being said was unintelligible. It sounded to the couple like the voices were not far beyond the tree line now. They stayed up very late tending to the fire, and only when the voices had finally stopped, they decided to put out the fire and go to sleep in the tent. Before doing so, the two had scanned the cove with a flashlight several times looking for boats that could have been the source of the talking, but there was nothing in sight. It was around 3 a.m. when they laid down finally, ready to catch some shut-eye. But about 15 minutes after they laid down, Ethan and Danny heard footsteps in the area around their campsite, over by where the fire was. They came from the direction of the bushes toward the inland behind them, a direction that was not traversable by people. The couple lay there, hoping it was just a bear or any animal, because the only bears on the island are black bears, which usually are very timid around people. The footsteps went from the fire, then over to the tent, then back into the woods. 5 minutes later, the footsteps came back again to the fire, and now, clear as day, there were two female voices talking gibberish very loudly. Their communication was not resembling any languages known to Ethan or Danny, and they seemed to be talking over each other, having what could barely be considered to be a conversation at full volume in the dead of night very far away from civilization without using lights to navigate through the dense brush relatively quietly in a direction that seemed impossible to traverse on foot. The two voices moved from the fire pit area over to the tent, still talking at a loud volume. They stood over the tent talking for a few seconds, then went completely dead as night silent. They went back into the woods to never be seen or heard again. Ethan and Danny lay there completely frozen and afraid for a long time. They woke up around 11 a.m. the next day because of how late they fell asleep. They packed up first thing and never returned. The couple probably made the best decision to remain quiet in the tent, not drawing attention to themselves from whoever or whatever was outside the tent. The following pictures you're about to see were taken by hikers Kylie Cashwell and John Stone, who both live in Eagle Mountain, Utah, a small town south of Salt Lake City. For the past few years, they had been exploring forests in search of interesting things, and one day they found it. One day Kylie was hiking in Cedar Fort, just 5 miles south of Salt Lake City. While hiking, she found large amounts of animal bones and piles of junk people had dumped. But things started to get strange when she started coming across strange symbols and animal parts scattered throughout the forest, some of them in weird formations. On September 15th, she decided to bring her friend Josh along with her to show him in person the unusual things she was finding. This time, the two came across something even more disturbing. On the trail, there was a severed deer head and a pentagram surrounded by deer legs, which were not there the first time Kylie walked the trail. The sun was going down, and after getting their pictures, they agreed it was time to head back to the car. But the more they walked, they realized they didn't recognize the path they were on. So the two start looking around for anything that could refresh their memory of where they were. But as it got dark out, the two accepted that they were lost. With nothing but their phone flashlights to navigate, they started getting the feeling they were being watched. As they picked up their pace, the two started to hear the trees and bushes moving at least 20 feet to their right, made more concerning by the fact that there was no wind that night. The two started to panic and hurried onto a trail they found, hoping it would take them back to Kylie's car. Just when things couldn't seem to get any worse, Kylie and Josh heard a scream so deep and horrific that it sounded neither human nor animal. The two sprinted down the trail, Kylie making a conscious effort not to look back, but Josh did. And Josh claimed to see a large black figure on the trail behind them, too big to be a human. The two made it to the car by some stroke of luck, losing whatever was chasing them. So they left the forest and went straight home. Upon doing research, Kylie found documents of common cult practices reported in those woods, as well as numerous murders and disappearances that happened in the area throughout the years. Like Ethan and Danny in the first story, Kylie has not returned since. Deep in the woods in northern Germany, two friends were hiking in an area formerly territory of the German Democratic Republic when they came across these strange periscope-like pipes protruding from the ground. Feeling either brave or foolish, they decided to investigate further. They discovered a doorway hidden behind several bushes, covered by a large wooden lid. What they found hidden beneath the ground is a pretty disturbing piece of history. The doorway led to a huge abandoned army bunker. There were several tunnels leading off in different directions, which intersected a long central corridor. There were so many different directions to go that exploring the place felt like going through a maze to the two friends. They tried not to stray far away from each other in fear of getting lost. That's how big the place was. As they ventured deeper into the structure, they came across German writing on the wall, which translated to "help." Curiosity still got the better of them, and they continued deeper into the bunker. And as they did, the structure became more and more decayed. More writings were found on the walls, this time reading, "Hello Satan, I love you." Some of the rooms and corridors were flooded and smelled like sewage. They made their way into a very large room with a strange machine in the center. It's very possible the previous occupants had fled the bunker in a hurry, as there was a single shoe still stuck in the sludge on the floor. Why wouldn't someone have time to grab one shoe unless they were in a hurry? The structure was believed to be an old military bunker, possibly used for shelter by the Nazis during World War II. But why did the soldiers seemingly leave in such a hurry? And whether they were the ones who had written the warning messages on the walls is unknown. In this last story, for the person's safety, I'll refer to him as just Bill. Bill is an avid hiker who in 2016 was visiting his brother upstate New York near Downsville. Bill's brother owns a small house and a barn up there, and from time to time Bill and other family members would go up to visit. This was in the late fall, and so the foliage was already mostly orange, and more than half of the leaves had fallen off the trees. Bill was hiking a narrow trail which was not far from his brother's place. This trail is in the middle of a very rural area, and it connects from the occasional property to property. So when Bill stumbled across a duffel bag on the ground in the middle of the woods, it was a surprise. The duffel bag looked like it was relatively new. It didn't look dirty as if it had been sitting in the woods for an extended period of time. There was a foul odor emanating from the bag, however, like something rotting inside. Bill assumed the worst, but he knew he had to open the bag to see what's inside in case it actually could have been a person. He was building up the courage to open the zipper to the bag, but before he could, he heard footsteps approaching from off the trail and a voice saying, "That's mine, please don't touch it." A large man in a dirty jacket and jeans was quickly approaching from the woods and grabbed the duffel bag off the ground. The two exchanged looks for a moment. Bill told the man he assumed the bag was forgotten by someone, and the man told him he was storing his kill from his hunt in the bag. Even though Bill isn't a hunter, he knew it's standard to use a cooler for storing fresh kill, not a duffel bag of all things. This also wouldn't explain the foul smell so soon, as usually dead bodies only start to smell after a few days, not right after death. So he apologized and continued walking down the trail, with a little more speed in his step. It's likely the man noticed Bill's nervousness, because he heard the duffel bag get dropped on the floor as he was walking away, but as he looked back, he didn't see the man anymore. Bill nervously continued along the trail, taking out his phone to try to call his brother for an emergency pickup by the road, but he didn't have any reception in the woods. All he could do was press forward and avoid crossing paths with that man again. But as he continued on, he kept hearing leaves crunching from not far behind him, and any time he looked back, the coast seemed clear. But eventually, his fear that he was being followed became real. He saw that man following him in the distance in a stalkerish manner, hiding behind a tree. Without thinking, Bill started to run as fast as he could down the trail. He knew he was being followed without even looking back, because he could hear the leaves being crushed from not too far behind him. Bill came to an abandoned-looking property with overgrown grass, and having grown too winded to continue running, he attempted entry to the old house through the back door, and was able to get inside. Bill hid under a cot in the first bedroom he found, and he heard the back door open again, followed by heavy footsteps moving in a hurry. They went from room to room, and Bill could hear the man's heavy breathing from also being out of breath. The man's footsteps came into the bedroom just for a second and left right after. He didn't look under either of the two cots. Bill heard the back door to the house open and slam shut again, but he laid under the cot for another half an hour, not taking any risks. He only got up when he realized it would be dark soon, and he needed to get to a road to call for help. He proceeded to leave the house and run down the dirt trail by the house that was most likely once used as a driveway, which led him to a road. From here, he eventually hitched a ride with a passing car, who gave Bill a lift back to his brother's house, where Bill would call the local police department and report his encounter. Given the severity of the case, police would show up to the house to get a more detailed description of the man's face, the location it happened, and other information. Though it was never technically confirmed what was in that duffel bag, The rotting smell would already be clue enough, but the fact that the man so intently chased after Bill shows that he was hiding something that he didn't want any witnesses for, most likely dumping a dead body. On March 4th, 2022, these were the texts 21-year-old college student Gavin received after getting home from a night out with friends. Hey, is this Gavin? Yes, who's this? It's Alex. Where you at? Send your location. I'm at home. What happened to you? What number is this? I'm using my friend's phone. We're stranded at the bar. Can you call us an Uber to your house? What? Why don't you just do it? Dude, my app isn't working. Just figure it out. I don't even know what that means. Just send your address. Gavin was out with his friends Alex and Omar, and they were last with each other at a bar in Dallas called Parliament. The trio was getting ready to wrap up the night, but Alex stayed behind when he saw other friends at the bar. So Gavin and Omar went home, and about an hour passed with no contact between the three. That was when Gavin received the text from the random number, and as you see, they claimed to be Alex using his friend's phone. Alex had lost his phone, and he was using his friend's phone, who Gavin apparently had never met before. He was asking Gavin to call him an Uber, since according to him, it wasn't working on his phone. Gavin refuses, basically noting how silly that sounds, and tells him to call his own. The conversation picks up here, where Alex agrees to apparently call his own Uber and asks for Gavin's address. Gavin stated that this was around the time he was becoming slightly suspicious, but he still gave his address, however not without making a comment about how he should memorize his address by now. He says he cut him some slack due to the fact that he was drinking. Gavin asked him why he was using his friend's cell phone, to which he got a response that Alex lost his phone. He then lets them know that they're on their way, and when Gavin asks Alex if he knew his friend, he responds, "Nah, he's cool though." 10 minutes later, the number sends a text that truly starts to make the conversation suspicious. "Can we just come in through the front door when we get there?" As if asking Gavin to leave the door unlocked. It was at this moment that he started to question everything about the interaction, from the first text being, "Hey, is this Gavin?" to the asking Gavin to call them an Uber, to now the leaving the door unlocked. He tried to call the number, but it rang and went to voicemail. He then tried to text and call Alex's number repeatedly, but it would just keep going to voicemail, and the text would just say delivered. Gavin stopped answering this foreign number now, and called his friend Omar to ask him if he'd heard anything from Alex, to which Omar said he had not. After reading Omar all of the texts, Omar agreed something was off. They looked to call the bar Parliament, but there was no number listed online to call. Around this time, the number texted Gavin again, saying, "We're here, open the door." Gavin went to his door and looked through the peephole of the door. There was no one in immediate view though, which maybe at first would have implied it was all a prank. But when there was a knock at the door, Gavin checked the peephole again. There was still no one on the other side. Reality of the situation was setting in now for Gavin, as this was no longer just texts on a screen. Someone was actually on the other side of his door. So he asks, "Who is this?" Straight to the point. They reply with simply, "LOL." Gavin asks again, "Who is this?" And they reply, "Open the door." So instead of answering again, Gavin calls the police. The knocking persists for a few minutes, in long intervals. Then it stops for good when the person or people on the other end realize Gavin was onto them. Gavin went on to DM one of Alex's friends who he was hanging out with after he and Omar left. And almost instantly, the friend DM'd him back explaining that he, Alex, and their other friend were jumped by a big group of men in the street. They were all badly injured and went to the hospital. Alex's phone had been stolen, while one of his friend's wallets and phone was stolen. Alex not having a password on his phone meant all of his info and conversations were accessible. Alex's friend helped him in getting his phone locked. The police report that Gavin would get from the police who came to his house would later help Alex in getting his service provider to replace his stolen phone for him. The lack of a password on the phone meant the thieves were able to gain information such as Alex and Gavin's conversation, where they would deduce that Gavin was home alone and an easy target. So if Gavin didn't catch on to the suspicious situation, he may have been opening his door to 2 or more people ready to attack him too and rob his house. The phone number that was being used to text Gavin turned out to be another stolen phone, therefore didn't help in finding the thief. The case regarding finding the thieves and assaulters remains open. These texts were received by an anonymous viewer from his dad's ex-girlfriend, who will be named Kathy for the purpose of this recounting. The viewer will be called Rob. The reason Rob's dad ended things with Kathy was because of her increasingly erratic and delusional tendencies. Her mental health was declining for unknown reasons. Rob's dad was dating Kathy for about half a year, and Rob's grandparents both passed away during that time. Rob's dad wasn't very open at first about how Kathy would start acting all paranoid about his son's dead grandparents, about how she believed they placed a curse on her. Rob's dad cut ties with Kathy when the delusions got too ridiculous. Rob was left in the dark for the longest time about Kathy's delusions though, presumably out of embarrassment for having spent so much time with a supposed nutjob. It wasn't long after his father's breakup with Kathy that Rob would receive texts from her himself. When her attempts at reaching his father no longer worked, she clearly went to him instead. Kathy texted Rob, "Hello sweetie, I need your help." Rob replied with, "What? What's up?" "Your father's parents put a curse on me. I need you to tell me the cemetery and plot number they were buried at." "What do you mean they put a curse on you?" "I keep hearing their voices and having bad premonitions. I know it sounds crazy, but I need it to stop." Of course, being told by somebody that they were hearing your dead grandparents' voices would be a clear indication that the person is completely unhinged. So Rob went to show his dad the texts. His dad laughed and told him to just ignore her. Rob says that instead of blocking her though, he just let her continue to text him to see how crazy her texts would get. She followed up later that night with, "I need to exhume their grave. If you help me out, I will sleep with you. I know you've always checked me out whenever I was in your dad's house." Rob still didn't answer, and the next day, her text got a little more graphic. Rob showed these texts to his dad, and this time his dad was not amused. He called Kathy and screamed that he would be getting a restraining order if she didn't stop. When he hung up, she kept trying to call until he ended up blocking her number. That same night, while Rob's dad was asleep, Rob was still in his den watching a show when he heard the doorknob jiggling. He went to look through the glass atop the door and saw Kathy fiddling with a knife in the key slot of the doorknob. She looked up at him and through the glass and started pleading with him to let her in. Rob called for his dad, and she started to scream no. When his dad came to the door, he screamed at her and then went to call the cops. Kathy would scream back constant obscenities and threats, waving her knife in the air. She didn't leave, and police arrived to her still at the door with knife in hand. Based on her coming to their house with a weapon and not leaving when asked, she was arrested, and Rob's dad filed for a restraining order against her. Clearly, Kathy was more than just delusional and was starting to suffer from some sort of mental illness, such as paranoid disorder. This does not mean she wasn't a danger to others though, as well as herself, evident by the knife she brought to their house and attempting to break into their house. Luckily, no one was hurt. An 18-year-old girl named Leanna, living in Hoboken, New Jersey, was at a local bar with her friend on a Saturday. That's when she got a notification that someone was trying to send her a message on Instagram. Usually people disregard these message requests, as they're messages from people you don't follow back on Instagram. In a girl's shoes, those message requests are 9 times out of 10 men sending them flirtatious and often creepy messages. A lot of people don't ever check these messages, but sometimes when you get that notification that someone sent you a message request, curiosity gets the better of you. In this case, Leanna opened the DM, and it was from some random account with no profile picture and no followers, asking her if she was at McSwiggin's, a local bar in Hoboken. Right away this is cause for alarm of course, because this would be coming from someone who knew where she was at that exact moment, someone intentionally using a fake Instagram account. Leanna follows with, "Yes, who is this? You look good in that pink top. Aren't you 18 though? Shouldn't be in a bar. I won't tell anyone though. Who is this? Just a guy who thinks you're really attractive." By this point, Leanna assumes it's a prank by someone she knows, and asks who's messing with her. The person replies it's neither of the names she just mentioned. Upon Leanna asking for a selfie, the person replies, "Can't." The girls look around the bar for anybody that could be alone, mainly an older, predatory-looking man. They saw a few men that appeared to be alone sitting at the bar. None of them were eyeing the girls, though. That's when she says, "Okay, bye, we're leaving." Moderately uncomfortable, the two girls leave the crowded bar and start walking. They go to another bar nearby, which is far less crowded than the first. They sit at the bar and order a few drinks, looking for young guys to talk to, when Leanna's phone vibrates again, and she gets another creepy message from the person. It said, "This is my favorite bar, good choice." Leanna shows her friend the message, and then the two start looking around the bar for someone who could be sending the messages. And as if he was looking to be found out, Leanna saw a man sitting on the bar stool closest to the door, looking at her with a blank, wide-eyed expression. She says the best way she could describe his appearance was the killer from the movie The Lovely Bones, mainly because of his glasses, hair, and mustache. They made extended eye contact, to the point that it seemed the man was outwardly trying to be creepy, making it obvious who he was. The girls asked the bartender for help. They showed him the DM she was getting and then pointed at the man, who in response to being pointed at, started looking around the room, in any direction but towards the girls. The bartender went over and told the guy in a loud, commanding voice to leave the bar without question, threatening to kick his ass if he didn't leave the girls alone. The man left the establishment, surely feeling at least some sense of embarrassment, as anyone would. Leanna and her friends stayed at the bar for about half an hour, only to avoid running into the man outside. But Leanna says their mood to stay out was gone after that creepy encounter, and they just wanted to know who that was, or how he knew Leanna and where she was at that moment. When the girls left, they began walking home. They were on 2nd Street, a quiet one-way road, especially at the hour they were walking. They were being mindful of their surroundings, making sure they weren't being followed. But even when you think you're aware of your surroundings, the unexpected can always happen. Leanna and her friend heard running footsteps from behind them out of the blue, and there was no time to react before the man grabs Leanna with one arm around her face and mouth and the other around her waist. He picked her up as she tried to scream and fight, and of course her friend did the screaming for her and continued to hit at the man. The commotion caught the attention of people from around the corner, and a few people came to the scene. The man released his grip from the girl and walked away quickly. Nobody went after the man. The girls called the police there on the spot. Leanna showed the police the DMs, and 2 witnesses backed up their story as well. A police report was made and a case was opened to find the man in question. Leanna would speak to detectives at her home a few days later, who gathered all the information she could give. They would later use the surveillance footage from the 2 bars, but the police have not yet been able to match the man seen in the footage to anybody. As a precaution, she still has her Instagram disabled to this day. If someone is dedicated enough, they can find someone through their Instagram by keeping track of what places they go to in their pictures, what school they go to, and who they associate with. That's why it often is a good idea to keep your Instagram private. Randonautica is an app that uses a random number generator and location settings to create coordinates for users to explore in their local areas. The app was released in February 2020 and became especially popular during the COVID lockdowns. People would often document their findings through video and post them online. Sometimes people find downright creepy things or places, or even find themselves at the scene of a crime. A viewer named David sent me this first story and footage. It was August of 2020. The weather had been good, and so he and a friend decided to use Randonautica out of boredom. They generated 4 anomalies in total, since the first 3 were in someone's backyard or inaccessible locations. In the app, anomalies are points that can be either attractors or voids. Attractors are clusters of random points that are very dense, while voids are clusters with a very low density. The 4th anomaly looked promising, and so the 2 friends drove there. You can see on the screen the street they drove down, followed by the small path they went down after parking. The anomaly had a radius of 470 meters, so it was a fairly big area, but they didn't have to look around for long before making a bizarre and honestly creepy discovery. This is a photograph of the path they walked down, and as they walked down, they stumbled across a note stuck through a stick. On the outside of it, it read, "Write down your cell phone number." When folded open, it read, "I can give you a cell phone number or even an email address. Give me your mail address and I will send you it," with what it is referring to remaining unclear.
So you can see, first of all, it says, write down your cell phone number. When you fold it open, ich kann dir eine Handynummer geben oder sogar eine E-Mail-Adresse. Gib mir eine Mailadresse und ich sende es dir. So it says somewhere along the lines, I can give you a cell phone number or even an email address. Give me an email address and I'll send it to you. So yeah, that was just hanging on this tree here. on this branch, this piece of paper. I'm gonna put it back.
He ended up writing his number on the note and putting it back on the stick. Right next to the note were a bunch of bras lined up on a fallen tree branch with no explanation.
So, yeah, that's a bunch of bras. In total, 1, 2, 3, 4, behind there, 5, 6. There are more.
These items couldn't have been left there for more than a few days, as they were discovered on the 6th of August, and the last rainfall was 3 days earlier, yet the piece of paper showed no signs of ever having gotten wet. Among some of the other things that the friends found at the scene were 2 packages of condoms and a pot that was seemingly used for a fire. The friends returned the next day on the 7th, and the note where he wrote down his number was gone. A few days later, he got a text from an unknown number just saying hi. He answered saying, "Hi, who is this?" The number then replied his address, and at this point he blocked the number. Whatever or whoever this little scene was meant for remains a mystery. This following footage, posted online by Taylor Vasquez, documents her disturbing findings when also using Randonautica. She downloaded the app and generated a location not far from her house. The location turns out to be an abandoned creek-looking area.
So I keep seeing that Randonut thing all over TikTok, and I really want to try it out. So I just downloaded the app, and I found a location that's like 1.5 miles by my house. So I'm gonna go check it out and see if I can see.
Nothing seems out of the ordinary at first, and it seems like a typical random location the app could lead somebody to, until she finds a series of disturbing drawings, seemingly done by a child.
Pretty creepy. I'll go see what that is. Okay, so I just opened up one of the photos, and it's whatever the fuck that is. Then we have these random 3. This one's It's Your Birthday with the snowman with, I don't know. And these 2 I just put together. It's like, play with me. Alright, I think it was just my imagination. I think I'm just hearing shit.
As she's analyzing the drawings, she suddenly hears an unsettling sound.
Play with me.
It sounds like the voice of a young child, but the video cuts here. On a later date, Taylor returns to the creek, but this time there are new drawings that weren't there last time. According to her, these ones being even creepier than the previous series of drawings, with one of the drawings being a sigil of Baphomet. As she's distracted by the drawings, the voice of a child can once again be heard in the background.
If they have messages on them, because then, like, those look like symbols.
At first she doesn't seem to hear it, but once she does, she makes a dash for it and the video cuts.
I don't really see anything else.
After uploading the video to TikTok, a viewer pointed out what appears to be the face of a young child peering from behind a tree.
No one was with me, and tell me if you guys think that looks like a ghost child, because I don't know.
Taylor uploads another video analyzing a journal she picked up from the creek, with each page revealing another unsettling message. Taylor returns to the creek one last time and finds not only a Ouija board made out of a piece of cardboard, but also a large knife sitting next to it. This was the last time Taylor dared to return to the creek, and so whatever was going on here will remain a mystery. As with many things posted on the internet, there's no 100% proof that this whole series of videos weren't staged. However, there were certain aspects of the videos that viewers feel make them feel more realistic, mainly the weathered-looking pieces of paper that contain the drawings, along with the disturbing image of the child's face in the video. Whether or not this was genuine is really up to the viewer to decide. This story was sent by viewer Davey S. One night as she was scrolling through TikTok, she came across a story about a few teenagers who were using Randonautica, and after following the set of coordinates they were given, reached a secluded beach area where they saw a suitcase washed up that contained something disturbing. But I'll talk more about that in a bit. Davey and her roommate Ash saw this and were determined to make their own unsettling discovery on the app. They invited 2 other friends to join them, and when they all got together, they gathered in Davey's room and figured out how to use the app. They set a radius around their current location, 29 kilometers, or around 18 to 19 miles. After hitting the button to get the location, a screen popped up telling them to set their intentions for what they want to learn and experience during the outing. The word they inputted was spooky. The location the app gave was eerily close to her house. Davey and her friends live in a rural part of Alabama on Lookout Mountain. and at the bottom of the mountain is an abandoned steel plant, among a few other abandoned buildings in a lower income neighborhood. The location it gave the group of friends was 3 streets away from them. The location was on a very long road that led on for miles and miles without any other intersecting streets. The friends gathered into Davy's car with her friend Misa in the passenger seat and her friends Ash and Beck sitting in the back seat. It didn't take long for the girls to get to the street, and as Davy was about to turn left, she looked at the street sign Owl's Hollow Road. Davy's friends went from loud and excited to instantly quiet as she said, "We're here." Davy continued driving down this dark road surrounded by trees and no street lamps. It was pitch black at around 1 a.m., so the group was definitely feeling the creepiness factor kicking in. As they approached the destination, Davy pulled to the side of the road. At this point, all 3 of Davy's friends were becoming apprehensive about the whole thing, as they saw a very dark trail that led into the woods. The 4 friends sat in the car for a few minutes and laughed nervously about whether they should go through with this or not, but they all felt uneasy. The group started to agree that it felt like they were being watched. Despite being in a locked car, they felt vulnerable being alone with just a dying phone and a switchblade, so they all agreed to leave, and they pulled off further down the road. They kept driving, exploring this narrow road, and there was nothing but trees and the occasional street lamp. Davy was getting tired and decided to just do a 3-point turn on the very narrow road and go back home. There was a sense of relief, until the group realized they had to pass the trail again. As they passed it, Davy looked in her rearview mirror and saw what seemed to be a hooded male figure standing in front of the trail. She pressed the gas even harder, but she didn't tell her friends what she saw because she didn't want to scare them. The friends briefly talked about that night before going to sleep around 2 a.m. The next morning, Beck went home and Davy took Ash to work. Misa decided to hang out with Davy for a little longer before she had to be home in a few hours. They discussed going back to the trail since it was daylight and they felt a bit more comfortable. They made their way back to the trail and got out of the car, this time with keys and phone in one hand and pocket knife in the other. As they walked up the trail, they realized it led uphill, something they didn't notice the night before because it was so dark. They started to feel like something was off, like they were being watched again. They made it to the top of the trail, which led to a clearing, almost like a dump site as she described it. There were tires, fast food garbage, household items, etc. The 2 started looking around some more and came across a bunch of mattresses scattered throughout the clearing. The disturbing part was the mattresses were made beds. Pillows, blankets, sheets, all that you'd expect on a made bed. The sight was so unsettling that the 2 friends agreed to leave. They hurried back downhill towards the car, and about halfway, Misa stopped in front of Davy and pointed into the woods and said, "What is that?" as she spotted a red cooler in a small ditch, something they hadn't seen on the way uphill. They stepped down into the ditch to examine it, and as they walked over to it, all the 2 friends could smell was the stench of something rotting. Upon looking around the surrounding area, she spotted a dead cat carcass lying a few meters away. Avoiding getting too close to the dead carcass, she grabbed a big stick and tilted the cooler upright, which had a bit of weight to it, making it difficult. Something could be heard sloshing around inside of it like it was full of ice. She shoved the stick into the top of it and opened it slightly, and when it opened, a gust of hot, moist, putrid air hit Davy in the face. Bugs and maggots immediately started coming out of the cooler, along with a horrid smell of decaying overpowering the smell of the cat. Upon opening it a little more, what she saw was a wad of wet, matted black hair. Davy ran back to Misa and yelled to get in the car. The 2 sped down the road as Misa frantically asked Davy what was in the cooler, but she couldn't open her mouth in fear of puking. After driving a little ways up the road, hoping to find a driveway to assist in turning around, Davy eventually gave up and did another really tight 3-point turn on the narrow road, but the 2 would have to pass the trail one more time. As they did, Davy noticed some pieces of wood in the road that had not been there before. She looked around and saw the same hooded male figure from the night before, standing in the woods. She drove her car over the pieces of wood, damaging the bottom of her front bumper, and then sped off back home. She and her friend returned to the trail one more time since this incident to record the trail, which was the footage you've been seeing. Davy has deleted the Randonautica app and not used it since. Earlier I had mentioned that there was a video that inspired Davy and her friends to try the app themselves. That video was filmed by a couple TikTok users, who each posted their own angles of the video.
Guys, we found a suitcase at the...
Gabby, go. I'll hold your stuff. I don't know.
Bro. Wait, open it. Open it. It stinks, y'all.
It washed out.
Oh. Oh. Okay, so she's calling the police so we can see if it's actually a dead body or it's just food.
Found a suitcase on the in Alpine Beach.
Yeah, here's the crime scene.
So we just found this suitcase and we're gonna get it. Okay, so they're like opening it up with the sticks because we don't want to. Yes, there's a bag. There's a bag, like a black bag in there.
The Randonautica app generated a location that led them to a rocky breakwall below a jetty at the shore of Alki Beach in West Seattle, when they found a mysterious black suitcase washed up on a bunch of rocks under the bridge. As they approached the suitcase, they realized there was a foul odor emitting from the suitcase, and the contents of the suitcase may be more disturbing than they had initially thought. The teens called the police, but with Seattle police response times being notoriously slow, the police took 3 to 4 hours to show up, and by that time, the tide had risen enough to where the suitcase had washed away. It took a scuba team to retrieve the suitcase and its contents. The contents were indeed quite disturbing. The remains of a couple, Jessica Lewis, who was 35, and Austin Wenner, who was 27, were found inside of the black garbage bag inside the suitcase. Their murderer was their landlord, Michael Dudley, who the pair had previously argued with regarding their rent payments. It was reported by neighbors that on the night of the pair's murder, a male voice could be heard screaming, "Please don't do this, just let me leave," before gunshots were fired, and this was reportedly 10 days before the suitcase was found. The videos had eventually been taken down by the teens. With so many people using an app that's designed to send you to randomly generated places, it's inevitable that sometimes people are going to run into some horrific things that they were not supposed to find. So if you do use the app or anything like it, it's best to just stay alert to your surroundings. There were writings of somebody's plans to brutally slaughter the bullies from school, and he recognized the handwriting to be that of his daughter. There was a note that said, "I will rip blank into shreds and drown her in her own blood." He ran to his daughter's room and found Jacob in the closet. There was where Jacob found a secret doorway, which once opened, led to a stairway that led to a basement area that Milad had no idea of. A small table covered in weird dark red stains with a big book, a total of 28 pens which had no ink left, and a mountain of trash with an old laptop on the table, and he was heavily disgusted by its contents. Friday the 13th has long been considered a date cursed with bad luck. It's largely been a date that people look at as an excuse to do scary themed activities like binging scary movies. But this is the first year since 2017 that Friday the 13th falls in October. So for this video, we're looking at some of the most terrifying events that have actually taken place on the notorious day of bad luck. Tupac Shakur, better known as a stage name simply as Tupac, was an American rapper widely considered to be one of the most influential and successful rappers of all time. Tupac was arguably responsible for some of the most memorable rap verses in history. And while much of his notoriety came about after his shocking death in the mid-1990s, he's still remembered and talked about today. On the night of September 7th, 1996, Tupac was in Las Vegas celebrating his business partner's birthday. And one night while there, he attended the Bruce Seldon vs. Mike Tyson boxing match with Suge Knight at the MGM Grand. Later that night at about 11:15 p.m., while at a stoplight, a white four-door Cadillac sedan pulled up to the passenger side of Tupac's vehicle, and an occupant rapidly fired into the car. He was hit 4 times, once in the arm, once in the thigh, and twice in the chest, with one bullet entering his right lung. Tupac succumbed to his injuries 6 days later on September 13th, which was a Friday. The case went unresolved, with people suspecting his friend Suge Knight and even rapper Biggie Smalls of the murder. But recently on September 29th, 2023, 60-year-old Dwayne Keith Davis was charged in the killing of Tupac. Dwayne is not accused of being the one to pull the trigger that night in Las Vegas. But he is, however, being accused of having been the one to call the hit on Tupac. The trial is still currently in progress. A lot of people refuse to fly on Friday the 13th, and while that may come down to pure superstition among some people, there have been a few tragedies in the air on this day. In October 1972, on Friday the 13th, a plane heading to Chile was forced to crash land in the Andes Mountains. The flight was carrying 45 passengers and crew, including 19 members of the Old Christians Club rugby union team, along with their families, supporters, and friends. 3 crew members and 9 passengers died immediately. Several more died soon afterward due to the frigid temperatures and the severity of their injuries. Survivors of the crash hid in the wreckage for warmth and were eventually forced to cannibalize and eat deceased passengers to survive. A rescue team was sent out, but the mission was called off after 10 days. However, 72 days after the crash, as the weather improved with the arrival of late spring, 2 survivors climbed a 4,700-meter mountain peak without gear and hiked for 10 days into Chile to seek help, traveling a total of 38 miles. The 2 men were able to alert authorities that there were still 16 survivors trapped in the mountains, leading to their rescue. But believe it or not, on the exact same Friday the 13th as this plane crash, the same exact date, was another plane crash that killed all 164 passengers and 10 flight crew. It was Aeroflot 217. The plane needed to land due to horrible weather conditions, but crashed upon landing in Russia just 3 miles away from the runway. The exact cause of the crash could not be determined, but it's speculated that it was largely to do with simply human error. Casualty-wise, it is one of the worst plane crashes in history. While these incidents are incredibly rare, perhaps there is a reason flights are cheaper on Friday the 13th. If you're not superstitious, perhaps it may be worth it. But now we move from the sky to the sea, looking at the Costa Concordia disaster. On Friday the 13th, January 2012, the 8-year-old Costa Cruises ship Costa Concordia just left Civitavecchia, Italy at approximately 7:18 p.m. On board were 1,022 crew members and 3,206 passengers. As the Concordia approached Giglio Island several hours later, it deviated from its standard course, moving closer to the small Tuscan island for a maritime salute, which included the cruise ship sounding its horn to show off to onlookers on the land. The Concordia had performed several in the past, but the area was known for rock outcroppings, and at some point, such a formation was noticed in the ship's path. Francesco Schettino, the captain, ordered a change in course, but allegedly due to language issues, the Indonesian helmsman steered the boat in the opposite direction. It took a little over 10 seconds to correct the maneuver, and the boat's bow ultimately swung clear, but the stern collided with the reef at approximately 9:45 p.m. The damage had been done. The Concordia's port side had suffered a 174-foot tear. This caused the ship to list and then partially sink, landing unevenly on an underwater ledge. Although a 6-hour rescue effort brought most of the passengers ashore, 33 people died, 27 passengers, 5 crew, and later a member of the salvage team. An investigation focused on the shortcomings in the procedures followed by the Concordia's crew and the actions of the captain, Francesco, who left the ship prematurely, leaving behind about 300 passengers on board the sinking ship, most of whom were rescued by helicopters or motorboats in the area. Schettino was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Despite receiving criticism, Costa Cruises and its parent company Carnival Corporation didn't face criminal charges. The total cost of the disaster, including victims' compensation, refloating, towing, and scrapping costs, is estimated at $2 billion, more than 3 times the ship's original $612 million construction cost. The cruise line offered compensation to passengers to pay for all damages, including the value of the cruise. Only 1/3 of the survivors took the offer. This remains the biggest modern cruise ship catastrophe. David Anthony McGreevy was born in Southport, England in 1951 to Bella and Thomas McGreevy. David was the second oldest of 6 children. Since David's father was a sergeant in the British Army, a lot of his childhood was spent moving from one army base to another. This could mean that one year he was being educated in an army school in England, the next in Germany. According to David's mother, Living in Germany was his happiest time. David's mother Bella later said she could only remember one childhood incident of concern, as David was otherwise allegedly well behaved. In 1967, 15-year-old David left school and enlisted in the Royal Navy. However, he was dismissed from the Navy in August 1971 after being court-martialed for starting a fire that destroyed a mess wardroom. David then moved back in with his parents, but around this time his life was crumbling as his fiancée broke up with him and he was fired from several jobs. For this reason, his parents became fed up with him and kicked him out. So David turned to his friend Clive Kenneth Ralph, who let him board with he and his wife, Dorothy Elsie, and their two small children, Paul and Dawn. Clive and Dorothy had been school friends, and there was a 5-year age gap between them. They had married in September 1968, when Dorothy was 16 and pregnant with Paul. At the time David moved in, Dorothy was pregnant with their third child, Samantha, who was born on the 14th of July in 1972. With both Clive and Dorothy busy working, David acted as a babysitter for the Ralph children. He was regarded by family and neighbors as well as the Ralphs as a person who loved children. So what would soon happen was nothing short of unexpected and horrific. On Friday the 13th, in April 1973, Elsie was picked up from work by Clive, who had left home late with the children all asleep. When the couple arrived at their home, the police were already there, and they escorted them to the police station, where they were told of the horrible truth that their children had been murdered. So what happened? Well, David was known to be a heavy drinker and sometimes a violent drunk. He had gone to a nearby pub earlier that evening with a friend, and he had 7 pints of beer. The two men had played cards and darts, though a small altercation took place prior to leaving the pub. Clive picked David up from the pub and brought him to look after the children, while Clive went to get Elsie from work. Sometime between 10:15 and 11:15 p.m., David, while completely wasted, became infuriated with the children, beginning with the baby Samantha, who had been crying for her bottle. David violently killed the 3 children, each in a different yet brutal manner. After killing the 3 children, David went down to the basement and retrieved a pickaxe to further mutilate their bodies. David was arrested by police at 3:50 a.m., walking on a road near the Ralphs' home. Upon his arrest, David initially denied any responsibility, but several hours later, he admitted to the murders, with his only explained reasoning disgustingly being simply that the baby was crying. David was sentenced to multiple life sentences with minimums of 20 years, and in prison he was subjected to frequent abuse by other prisoners, and he spent most of his 45 years behind bars in protected conditions. In December of 2018, a parole board cleared David for release, declaring that he had changed significantly and he was no longer a risk. There's bound to be anywhere from 1 to 3 Friday the 13ths each year. If you are superstitious and choose to be more low-key on this inevitable date in an attempt to escape any bad luck, you may end up like Daz Baxter. On Friday the 13th in 1976, Daz decided to just stay in the bed for the day to avoid anything bad happening, only to be killed when the floor of his apartment block collapsed under him. There's countless other stories and examples of misfortune and downright tragedy that's happened on Friday the 13th, but this could be said for literally every other date on the calendar. At the end of the day, maybe it's just another day.